Chapter 741, Returning to the Family. As soon as he said this, it truly startled Li Qingheng. The Duruo spear was the first Foundation Establishment Realm Dharma artifact she had obtained, very handy in use. In all the years it had been in Li Qingheng's hands, it had never been inferior to any weapon held by her enemies. The spear had no name inscribed on it. When Li Tongya obtained it back in the day, he couldn't use it and didn't know its name, so it was kept in storage until Li Qingheng formed a bond with it, at which point she learned it was called Duruo. But this was the first time someone had called out the name of her Dharma artifact. Miao Quan, who was in front of her, now wore a look of both hatred and shock. He didn't make another move, but instead hovered midair on a beam of white light and asked, "Are you from the Golden Feather sect?" "Or the Azure Pond sect?" Li Qingheng withdrew her spear and stood calmly, replying softly, "Senior, you're mistaken, I'm from neither." Miao Quan's expression shifted several times before he ground his teeth and said, "Doesn't matter whether you are or not, or whether you admit it. Once I capture you, I'll find out everything by asking." He spoke in haste, unable to hold back a couple of coughs, which made Li Qingheng secretly pleased. Looks like that sudden profound thunder strike did affect him. He's just forcing himself to hide it. Now that Li Qingheng was in the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, she could condense 3 profound thunders in his thunder pool. Having only used one so far, she felt confident and wasn't overly afraid. Miao Quan once again summoned white lightning into his hands and gripped the axe handle with both hands, his eyes flashing white light. Li Qingheng also quietly activated her lightning arts, preparing for battle. Just then, several soft cries echoed as a figure appeared between the two like a gentle breeze. It was a middle-aged man in a green robe, with a jade flute at his waist softly glowing. He wore a Taoist crown and stood with his hands behind his back, coldly staring at Miao Quan. The shirtless, burly man's lightning gradually dissipated, his face stiff and grim. "Taoist Shen," said Miao Quan. Hearing this, Li Qingheng realized a senior from the Shen family had arrived. She calmed the surging thunder in her sea of lightning. Shen Yanqing let out a breath of relief and said joyfully, "Father." But Shen Yanqing quickly came to her senses, pulled Li Qingheng along and said softly, "Let's quickly retreat, for fear that if a fight breaks out, Father will be hindered." Li Qingheng nodded, summoned her lightning, and slowly withdrew with her. She glanced back from a distance and saw Miao Quan still staring at her from afar. His eyes were filled with white light, burning intensely, as if silently saying to Li Qingheng, "I will come for you." Li Qingheng felt a slight headache and followed Shen Yanqing across the sea. The girl oriented herself and said softly, "Sister Qingheng, we're close to Green Pine Island. It's safe there, let's rest a while." Li Qingheng nodded and the two flew together for a while. Soon, Green Pine Island came into view. The island was now completely different from before. Large reefs and beaches had emerged, its territory expanded several times over. Faint traces of old structures could be seen on the rocks and sand, even a few toppled stone steels. Shen Yanqing beside her seemed to be seeing it for the first time as well and exclaimed in awe, "I've heard that in ancient times, the shallow sea was a fertile land, and Green Pine Island was once Green Pine Peak. It's just as they said." The two landed together at the Shen family's cave residence on the island and activated its protective barrier. Only then did Shen Yanqing step forward with a smile and say, "This time, it's all thanks to your help, sister." Li Qingheng modestly replied, "I was merely passing by. Even without me, he wouldn't have been able to do anything to you. I only interfered unnecessarily." "You're too modest, sister." Shen Yanqing shook her head and smiled as she said, "The Eastern Sea is known for falling water rising storms. Thunder cultivators from across the seas and inland all flock to the Eastern Sea. The Miao family was originally a thunder cultivation family from the Southern Sea. Who would have thought this guy would end up all the way here? I too came to cultivate here because of the falling water rising storms of the Eastern Sea. I've been training on the island in recent years. When a major upheaval occurred, I returned by lightning and didn't expect to run into him." Li Qingheng hesitated slightly and asked tactfully, "I was just thinking. For your esteemed family, a Purple Mansion realm immortal family, traveling between the inland and the outer seas, surely you should have a reliable escort." Shen Yanqing lowered her gaze at once, a trace of concern appearing between her brows, and said softly, "Sister Qingheng, you may not know. The Yue cultivating sect has sealed its mountains and opened to the sea, leaving a vast territory behind. Devil and Buddhist cultivators are migrating south en masse, and my family, being under Yue cultivating sect's domain, has taken quite a blow. With the island's cultivators needing to hold their posts and the family's cultivators unable to spare the strength to come. Our family's master is likely entangled between the Merciful One and Devil Lords, unable to attend to all matters." She explained calmly, never bringing up the matter of the profund thunderstone. Li Qingheng didn't ask either, such things were beyond her reach. What concerned her more was the Duruo spear. Li Qingheng considered for a moment, then asked, "Fairy, do you know anything about the Duruo spear Miao Quan mentioned?" She had expected Shen Yanqing to know its origin, but after a moment of thought, she replied, "I've never heard of it. The name is unfamiliar." but judging by that Miao familyman's reaction, there seems to be some connection. As the two conversed, radiant light once again flowed across the western sky. Several streaks of multicolored light swept by, and Li Qingheng observed them clearly and said softly, "Heavenly glow dawn cloudliners." Shen Yanqing nodded and said, "Azure Pond, Golden Feather, the Buddhist sects and the devil factions, they've likely already begun fighting in Sioux State. These heavenly glow dawn cloudliners are probably transporting conscripted cultivators." These words struck right at the heart of Li Qingheng's worries, and she felt uneasy. If Azure Pond sect is going to conscript cultivators, my family will surely be included. Several of our juniors. Zijai is most likely still at Xia Mountain. Ximing absolutely cannot be sent to battle, and if Zijin returns home, it'll all fall apart again. I may be the only one suited for this role. Who knows how the Shen family will handle things next? Best to hurry home while they keep Miao Quan occupied. The more Li Qingheng worried about her family, the less she could sit still. She spoke gently, "Since we're now out of danger, I must hurry back home to check on things. I won't stay here any longer. Please give your father my regards." Shen Yanqing understood her concern for home. With her own father locked in a battle that might drag on, she nodded and said, "Then Sister Qingheng, please head back first. If there's a chance in the future, I'll visit to thank you properly." After a few polite exchanges, Li Qingheng left the Shen family's cave dwelling. She didn't take to the skies right away but thought to herself, "Zijai has gone to Xia Mountain, but Yuexiang is still on the mountain. Who knows how the people of Azure Pond sect treat her? It's better to bring her home." She immediately took the path to the other side. The Azure Pond sect was not something the Shen family could compare to. She had her own peak there. She simply gave her name, Li Qingheng of Qingdu. "Please ask Yuexiang to come down." The Azure Pond sect cultivator guarding the gate heard her surname was Li and responded with great respect. Before long, Li Yuexiang descended on a gust of wind. Upon seeing Li Qingheng alone at the foot of the mountain, her face instantly turned pale as she asked, "Aunt, my brother. Someone came looking for him the other day. They even said he abandoned his post without permission." Li Qingheng shook her head and spoke gently, "Your brother is fine. Pack your things, we're heading home. I'll explain everything on the way." Li Yuexiang nodded at once and even gathered Li Zijai's belongings from the peak as well. Together, they headed west. Chapter 742, The Eve Eye. Night deepened over Mount Qingdu. Li Zijin had not entered seclusion and stood amid wind and snow among the clouds at the mountain's peak. After waiting a while, he saw a bolt of violet lightning weaving through the clouds. It halted before him and transformed into two figures. "Aunt, little sister." Li Zijin called out, and before him stood Li Qingheng in jade armor with her white spear and his younger sister Li Yuexiang. Li Qingheng descended on the lightning and spoke softly, "Zijin." Li Yuexiang followed behind and greeted him. Li Zijin merely nodded and offered his congratulations. "Congratulations on your cultivation breakthrough, Aunt. I've heard things are in chaos out at sea. I've been meaning to go pick up little sister, but couldn't spare the time. I was about to send a letter to Brother Zijai when I happened to be on my way back. Was the journey back safe?" Li Qingheng descended with him into the main hall, and only after they sat down did she speak. There were some surprises. Thinking back on it, something doesn't add up. She recounted the events of her journey. After listening carefully, Li Zijin pondered for a moment and replied, "There is something odd, but it's hard to see clearly. The Eastern Sea is vast. How did you just happen to run into the Miao family and the Shens? Perhaps some faction is behind it. Even if you hadn't gone, Shen Yanqing surely could have held out until the Shen family's head arrived. I don't think their Taoist master used your strength to save her. I've never heard this Taoist master's life divine ability to be particularly cunning either, so it's likely not him." Li Qingheng nodded. She had been reflecting along the way as well. She spoke softly. "I suspect someone recognized the Duruo and used this method to inform the Miao family. But thinking deeper, what was the point? If a Taoist master had intentions for it, it's only a Foundation Establishment Realm Dharma artifact. Would our family refuse if they simply came to claim it? I've heard the Miao family also has a Taoist master. If the artifact were truly so important, they could have torn through the great void and taken it from me as easily as lifting a garment off a bed. They'd earn a favor and we'd owe them thanks. Why resort to all these twists and turns?" Li Zijin held a jade cup in hand, nodded slightly, and said, "The Profund Thunderstone. Just by the name, it's clearly no ordinary item. For Miao Quan to request it, even while facing pressure from two Purple Mansion Realm cultivators, it must be something extremely vital. He actually had some suspicions in his heart, but lacking certainty, he didn't want to speak them aloud. Could it be that Taoist Master Shooting used those two as a mouthpiece to tell Anne about the Profund Thunderstone? But there's no need for all that. He could have just sent someone to say a word. Doing it this vague way only leaves us with a name." The aunt and nephew exchanged a glance, seeming to reach some unspoken agreement, and quickly moved on from the topic. Li Zijin simply said, "In any case, I'll look into this matter properly." Li Qingheng then explained what the Kui family of Changzhou had said. After a moment of hesitation, she recounted her conversation with Kai Buzi. Li Zijian broke into a cold sweat just listening, not daring to speak rashly, and replied, "The Kui family said the Ning family might have it, then I'll write a letter to the southern border to inquire." The aunt and nephew discussed for a while. Then Li Zijian began writing, one hand pressed to his sleeve, and said warmly, "Yuexiang." He had wanted to bring up his younger sister Yuexiang's marriage, but when he saw his aunt smiling at him, he suddenly remembered his own status was still unsettled and stopped, a bit embarrassed. Li Qinghong removed her jade armor and gently placed it on the table. She took a white outer robe from her storage pouch and draped it over herself. It blended seamlessly with her snow-white inner garments. She said, "My cultivation has progressed. I no longer have need for this spirit armor. It's time to return it to the family." Li Zijian nodded and put it away. Li Qinghong thought for a moment, then asked, "By the way, does the heir have any armor? If the chance arises, I'd like to craft a set for him." "Armor?" Li Zijian fell silent for a moment, then said softly, "Aunt, our family does have some spirit ores, even one suitable for Foundation Establishment realm. But I still think we should use them to forge a spirit armor or feathered robe for you instead." "For me?" Li Qinghong frowned slightly, but then saw Li Zijian smile and say, "He's still just cultivating within the family now. In the future, he'll be managing the family and its affairs. With his bold personality, he'll have no trouble obtaining whatever fine items he wants. Aunt, you should think of yourself for once." Li Zijian brushed his hand over the storage pouch at his waist and retrieved several items, the first being a piece of gleaming, silvery refined iron. He said, "This is Nishui cold essence. Our family's iron mine has been in operation for decades. The cold iron extracted was refined repeatedly, and the most refined essence has been preserved here. It has been refined over 200 times, producing this Foundation Establishment realm material." Next was a thin golden sheet, which Li Zijian explained. "This, Aunt, you know already. It's Altar Goldstone. It was obtained alongside the Earthview Bloodstone that can heal and save lives. Also Foundation Establishment realm, though not very large in size. This was originally meant to forge a Dharma artifact for Li Ziming, but after acquiring the Sunseeker ring, it seemed he already had one. Yet as Green Pine Temple's name became increasingly controversial, no one dared to use it. Li Ziming was single-minded in his cultivation and cared little for Dharma artifacts, so with chaos looming, they decided to take it out early for crafting. The final item was a pale blue head-sized ore. It was a Heiyu emerald, barely Foundation Establishment realm, but abundant in quantity. It was taken from the Yu family's treasury. He handed all these items to Li Qinghong and simply said, "Aunt, please use these to forge yourself spirit armor or a feathered robe." Li Qinghong was briefly surprised, but then nodded and accepted them, saying gently, "The Azure Pond sect will surely conscript Foundation Establishment realm cultivators to the north. I'll lead the group myself. Having a set of spirit armor will be safer." She paused and added softly, "Among the many markets, we don't really know any trustworthy artifact smiths. In times like these, with constant unrest, who's to say they won't take our materials and vanish? I can't bring myself to trust them." Having spent a long time in the Eastern Sea, Li Qinghong's way of thinking had taken on the region's pragmatism. She always considered the worst outcome first. She simply said, "Let's wait a bit. Zijai may be returning soon. Better to let him handle these things." "You're right, Aunt," replied Li Zijian. Chapter 743, The Eve II, Changshan Peak. Li Zijai searched through several pavilions on the peak but couldn't find a single scroll. There was no sign of a fire vein or pill furnace, and the medicinal gardens were completely desolate. Only the central main hall had a jade slip hanging within, hidden behind the hall. With his Foundation Establishment realm cultivation and careful inspection, Li Zijai spotted and retrieved it at once. It was the complete mercury ingestion method of the 4th grade. It was indeed a quality technique, though it seemed to be already available for reference within the sect. It lacked a method for spiritual qi intake and required a substance called white mercury cinnabar elixir, which appeared to be quite rare. Yang Ruizhou strolled casually with him along the mountain paths as they chatted. After a while, someone arrived delivering a translucent jade slip. Li Zijai read it through. Changshan Peak indeed had a long history, with its own inherited cultivation method that had been passed down within the peak, rarely relying on sect-wide techniques. It could be traced back 400 years. The peak master then was known as Taoist Changshan, who cultivated in the Helen Mountain range before joining the Azure Pond sect and being granted a peak of his own. He specialized in the whole pill Dao, particularly secret white mercury, and was once considered one of the 2 greats alongside Ning Wenyu, the Moon Lake peak master who cultivated Lake Moon Autumn. Later, Taoist Changshan perished, and his teachings were passed into the sect. Successors tried to follow the Dao, but none matched his level. Their cultivation progressed slowly, even lagging behind standard techniques. The lineage steadily declined, yet each generation stubbornly persisted. With the death of the last peak master, Zhang Lingshu, the lineage was considered severed. All chants and secret texts vanished, leaving behind only a single cultivation method. The Yang family had noted that this technique, still stored in the sutra repository, had remained untouched to this day. It too was named Complete Mercury Ingestion Method, Secret White Mercury, thought Li Zizhai. Now that Li Zizhai held peak master status and had the Yang family's backing, his access to information was gradually improving. Seeing he didn't quite understand, Yang Ruizhao softly explained, "Zizhai, this secret white mercury belongs to the whole pill Dao." To Li Zizhai, it sounded like something of metal virtue, but the three metals were swamp metal, Zheng metal, and Xiao metal. There was nothing called the whole pill, so he asked, "Is it a metallic essence?" Yang Ruizhao shook his head and said, "If you're referring to classifications like the 5 waters as water virtue, the 5 fires as fire virtue, the 12 qi, primal magnetism, or yin and yang, the whole pill Dao doesn't fall under any of these. It's part of what we call ancient merging techniques. The Ziyuqi from the great Ziyuqi temple, the jade true of the true monarch Shangyuan, even the Hengzhu of the Hengzhu Dao, all fall under this category. They often carry an air of shamanic mystery, ambiguity between real and illusory, and the ancient alchemical flavor of mercury ingesting and metal seeking. From descriptions alone, secret white mercury is truly mysterious and profound. While it may not excel in direct combat compared to modern techniques, it can do so much more in so many other areas." Li Zizhai quietly took note of it and thought to himself, "Since I've inherited someone else's Dao lineage, if I can gather the right spiritual qi, and when I can take on disciples in the future, at least one of them should cultivate this Dao." After putting the jade slip away, he saw another stream of heavenly glow flying in from the south. Yang Ruizhao looked up in surprise, did a quick calculation and said, "Looks like it's the 4th wave of reinforcements. The sect has sent most of its own by now, and it's probably time to conscript from the various esteemed families." Li Zizhai nodded. Then Yang Ruizhao asked, "I wonder if your name is on the list." The two exchanged a glance, and Li Zizhai simply nodded. Yang Ruizhao smiled and said, "Yes, even if the deployment orders haven't arrived yet. All the benefits have already been handed over. You'll definitely be sent." Though he said it lightly, Yang Ruizhao's expression gradually grew serious. He spoke in a low voice, "There are only 2 more rounds of dispatch left. Zizhai, you should head out early. If you miss the timing, someone may use it against you." Li Zizhai nodded. The two rose into the air together, watching intently as the massive yet elegant heavenly glow dawn cloudliner folded its long glowing wings and slowly descended into the formation array. From all 36 peaks, people took to the skies. Li Zizhai and his brother-in-law Yang Ruizhao stood amidst the clouds, watching as the defensive formation on the cloudliner also faded. Yang Ruizhao asked, "I wonder who's leading the team." Just then, as the glowing formation gradually vanished, they saw a golden-armored cultivator standing at the ship's bow. He had deep-set eyes, broad shoulders, thick white brows and hair, and slightly narrowed old eyes. A fierce golden bow was slung across his back. The old man's armor shimmered with white light in the glow as he stood with hands behind his back. Yang Ruizhao was slightly startled. He glanced at Li Zizhai beside him and said with a smile, "So it's Li Xuanfeng, the golden bowstring." Since Li Xuanfeng was leading this ship, Li Zizhai would naturally go along. He was just about to fly toward the cloudliner when Yang Ruizhao beside him paused slightly and said, "My family also has 2 brothers. They'll be joining as well." Li Zizhai understood the unspoken request at once, and without waiting for him to continue, smiled and said, "Brother-in-law, go ahead and bring them. We'll head out together. It'll be good to look after each other on the journey." "Much appreciated," said Yang Ruizhao as he took his leave with a smile. Li Zizhai, however, paused thoughtfully. There's no telling whether brother-in-law got wind of the deployment early and wants the Yang family to accompany my uncle, all under the guise of coincidence. The Kai family was exerting heavy influence in this matter. Aside from several peaks under the command of Taoist Master Yuan Ziu, most others had sent direct descendants. Yang Ruizhao himself might very well be heading out too. Li Zizhai wasn't bothered, as relations between esteemed families weren't built on sentiment alone, but on mutual benefit. The Yang family had many daughters, and for Yang Ruizhao to maintain closeness with him, it was partly due to his own strong cultivation, and partly because the Li family was now powerful. Had the Li family still been as weak as during Li Tongya's fall, this brother-in-law would have offered little more than a polite smile in passing. None of these connections would exist. He reviewed everything in his mind but didn't immediately seek out Li Xuanfeng. Instead, he flew to the General Affairs Hall and used his new command token to receive his official assignment. Station at Baixiang Valley, on the border of Su State near Mount Baiyan. Await further orders. Mission: resist devil cultivators. He stored the token away, retrieved a map for careful study, and after some thought, decided to make a stop at the Sutra repository just in case. This complete mercury ingestion method was after all a secret technique left on the peak. There might be a different section or version, he thought. He searched for about 15 minutes and borrowed the sect's copy of Complete Mercury Ingestion Method. After a detailed comparison, he was slightly disappointed. The two versions are identical. The only difference is that the one from the peak isn't restricted. I can bring it back home, muttered Li Zijai. After inquiring, he learned the sect had some white mercury cinnabar elixir available. He returned the borrowed text, boarded the Dawn Cloudliner, and found a private chamber to settle into. Li Xuanfeng had gone to the main hall to report. Only members of the Ning family came over to greet him politely. Li Zijai waited a little while, and the Yang family members soon arrived. He recognized a few of the brothers by face. Perhaps he'd seen them once when fetching Yang Xior. They followed him into the cabin. The Yang family descended from the ancient Yue kings. They had deep roots and an extensive legacy. Though they had gone through periods of decline, they had now regained stability and begun to display their profound foundation once more. But Li Zijai also clearly saw the flaws. In the chaos of earlier times, the Yang family's secular branches had been nearly wiped out. With their numbers dwindled, they only had a single peak within the Azure Pond sect. Children often began cultivation from birth, and the extinction of sub-branches was common. Moreover, the Yang family had no external holdings or industries. Nearly every member embodied the aloofness of esteemed family disciples. They were detached from worldly matters, indulgent and carefree. Having cultivated exclusively atop immortal peaks since youth, they were even more extreme than other families. Now, gathered before Li Zijai, they greeted him politely but quickly withdrew to the side, joking amongst themselves without the slightest awareness of the life-or-death battle ahead. Their Dharma robes were bright, but their cultivation was shallow. They gave off an air of frivolity, and that was the better part of it. One of them was only at the Qi cultivation realm, with his blood Qi murky. What's worse, he had brought along a woman of the embryonic breathing realm. She was strikingly beautiful, and her cultivation method was peculiar, likely of the furnace vessel variety. Li Zijai scanned the room but found no one truly noteworthy. His brother-in-law must not have had an easy time managing this lot. That said, if even one of them can make it through the bloodshed, it might be worth watching. With that thought, a faint eagerness stirred within him. If there's an opportunity that isn't too perilous, perhaps I could bring along the younger ones from the Radiant Lure generation. Chapter 744, The Eve I. Li Zijai rested briefly as the cloud ship beneath his feet began to move. A man at the late stage of the Qi cultivation realm approached from outside the door. He had a pale face without a beard, hair white as snow, bearing a dignified air. Only one sleeve hung empty, and he stopped beside Li Zijai. He cupped his hands in greeting and said softly, "I am Fei Yi. Greetings, young master." Li Zijai found the name vaguely familiar, likely one of the Fei family members who had accompanied them back then. In recent years, under the care of Li Xuanfeng, he had survived despite being covered in wounds. Li Zijai returned the courtesy and replied gently, "Zijai greets the senior." He then recalled his uncle Li Yuanqin, who had been stationed in the southern border. He was likely younger than himself, though what he looked like now was anyone's guess. He asked, "I wonder if my uncle has come. I must see him at least once." Fei Yi shook his head and replied, "The master was sent into the sect to cultivate alongside disciples of the Kai family." Upon hearing this, Li Zijai's heart became clear as a mirror. He sighed inwardly while Fei Yi appeared somewhat anxious, taking a seat beside him and asking, "I've spent many years in the southern border, often in seclusion. The general has marched to the eastern sea once again. I've only heard scattered words about the Fei family. May I ask, Peak Master, how is my family doing? What realms have Tongyu and Tingxiao reached?" Li Zijai nodded slightly and answered, "At present, young Master Tongyu manages the house. We've lost contact with them, so I know little. I've only heard that young Master Tingxiao failed to make a breakthrough and perished. His Daoan lineage ended." The news seemed to match the old man's expectations. He showed no visible shock, but at the words perished, Dao ended, his fingers trembled on his knee, and he said somewhat at a loss, "Ah, I knew that boy." Li Zijai then recounted all the information he knew. Fei Yi nodded in thanks repeatedly but could say nothing. He sat upright in his seat, sleeves gathered, remaining silent for most of the journey. The heavenly glow Dawn Cloudliner was incredibly fast. In just a short while it began to show signs of stopping. Only then did Fei Yi shake out his sleeve, revealing a hand gone pale from gripping tightly. He pulled out a small letter he had written long ago and said, "If there's a chance, may I trouble Peak Master to deliver this letter to the Fei family on my..." Over the years, every time Li Xuanfeng returned home, Fei Yi would ask him to bring a letter. By now there were at least 3, if not 5. Had anything changed in the Fei family? Likely not. Yet this old man remained incessant, faithfully writing every time. Though he never opened the letters, even an outsider could see the sincerity in his heart. Li Zijai could see it clearly and sighed inwardly. Put the letter away and replied, "If the chance comes, I will certainly deliver it for you, senior." Fei Yi nodded. As he watched the Cloudliner gradually descend, he finally couldn't hold back and said quietly, "If one day the Fei family collapses, if it's within your power, I beg you to preserve at least one bloodline." Li Zijai did not dare to promise, so he could only respond gently. "With Taoist friend King Yi cultivating in Yuanwu, your esteemed family will surely overcome adversity." The elders will also look after things. Please rest assured, senior. Fei Yih nodded and said no more. After some time, Li Xuanfeng stepped inside with his golden armor already removed. He spoke softly, so Zijai, you've arrived. Li Xuanfeng gave a slight nod and continued, we'll make our first stop in Su State to meet the people of the Golden Feather sect. Li Zijai followed him to the bow of the ship. A cold northern wind stirred gently. They had already crossed the great river that divided north and south. Waves churned and the water current surged mightily. Only after crossing the great river did the spiritual atmosphere completely change. The surroundings turned a dusky yellow-gray. The ground was dry and cracked, scattered with white bones. The air was filled with the lingering presence of blood and resentment. Several escape lights streaked across the sky. When they saw the heavenly glow Dawn Cloudliner emerge, they all turned back. These people seemed experienced. After flying a short distance, they dived straight into the earth and vanished into the gray smoke. Li Zijai watched for a moment, then asked aloud, Uncle, do you know how the conscription of the various families will be arranged? Li Xuanfeng's armor had actually lost its spiritual glow back when the two true monarchs, Pristine Water and Taiyuan, had taken action. Now it was little more than a few pieces of hanging metal and would require significant effort to repair. Since his return was brief, he had yet to repair it and had already stored it away. Upon hearing Li Zijai's question, he answered, naturally, it won't be for us to handle. When the time comes, Dawn Cloudliner will arrive at various places to conscript cultivators, according to the sect's directives. Li Xuanfeng paused, then continued, as an initial precaution, 45% of each family's cultivators will be drafted to Mount Bianyan. If the fighting intensifies, more will be summoned. Li Zijai listened in silence and softly said, if 45% of a family's cultivators are taken, it's like breaking their bones. I had wondered how many of our family's cultivators would be sent. Now it seems there's no escaping it. Indeed. Li Xuanfeng stood quietly, then spoke after a while. In the mountains, blades and spears spare no one, yet for small families opportunities abound. Resources and Dharma artifacts they normally couldn't dream of today, they can find them just by scavenging two corpses. Great chaos brings great opportunity. The two chatted for a while, then a few people approached. Li Zijai took a closer look. The leader wore a flowing Dharma robe that shimmered with light. It was his brother-in-law, Yang Ruizhou. Just earlier on the ship, Yang Ruizhou had gathered a few close Taoist friends. Several of them were at the Foundation Establishment realm and now followed behind him, bowing respectfully toward Li Xuanfeng and saying, greetings, senior. Li Xuanfeng nodded in acknowledgement, asking each of their names in turn. Yang Ruizhou stepped closer, and the three of them stood together at the bow of the ship, signaling unity in leadership aboard, with Li Xuanfeng at the head. Yang Ruizhou gave Li Zijai a look and spoke softly, his tone tinged with helplessness. You've met those younger ones from my family, right, Zijai? What did you think? Li Zijai smiled and nodded, replying very polite and composed. Though the words were praise, Yang Ruizhou understood the subtext. He sighed and said, let's hope they improve. As they conversed, Mount Bianyan gradually came into view. The mountain lay at the center of Su State's 23 southern cities. It was an ideal position for dispatching reinforcements in all directions. It was shrouded in white mist, giving off a faintly eerie atmosphere. While the younger ones chatted, Li Xuanfeng grew absent-minded. He still vividly remembered these mountains and the Zhenhui temple atop them. He had once come here with his uncle to capture a wolf demonic beast. By now, the place had likely fallen to ruin. Xuanling. The name of his younger brother echoed in his heart, though his expression remained blank. Only Li Zijai behind him seemed to notice something and glanced at him quietly. Chapter 745, The Eve IV, Mount Qingdu. While Li Xuanfeng and his party traveled north, another heavenly glow Dawn Cloudliner descended at Moongaze Lake. It gleamed with the same soft, glowing hues and was now resting atop Millen Mountain. The various households around the lake rushed to send representatives. Cultivators bustled up and down Millen Mountain. Li Zijin stood atop the jade platform on the mountain's summit, gazing at the silently landed Dawn Cloudliner with a somewhat complicated expression. He thought to himself, truth be told, this is the first time our family has hosted a Dawn Cloudliner. Though unexpected, it does mean we're recognized as a voice of authority in the region. He waited on the platform for a moment. Beside him stood Chen Dong and Injayan, both at the late stage of the Qi cultivation realm. On the other side were Nsiming and Nsiwei, who had also reached the same stage. The two brothers had just returned from the desert, so they were still dusty and travel-worn. Li Zijin's calculations back then hadn't been wrong. Now, among the Li family's esteemed ones and core lineage, there were only 7 late-stage Qi cultivation realm cultivators, and then family alone accounted for 3. Even this year, the brothers' offspring had made breakthroughs in the Qi cultivation realm. The bloodline was extraordinarily potent. It was something everyone knew. Still, none had reached the Foundation establishment. That said, the two brothers were unquestionably loyal, the type who followed orders without a word of complaint. This gave Li Zijian a measure of reassurance. The Chenin families were the strongest. Lined up behind them were the Tian, Du, and Su families. Further back stood Dili Yaoji of northern Mount Yue and Li Jimin and Shamali of eastern Mount Yue, off to the side. As for the surrendered tribes and families settled in Mount Yue, they didn't even qualify to stand on the platform. Shamali was an elder of his family. He had been the first king of eastern Mount Yue, rising to power after pledging allegiance to the Li family. He practiced thunder arts and had even met Li Tongya. Thunder arts consumed lifespan, and the methods practiced by this old Mount Yue cultivator were far from orthodox. He aged faster than most and now stood in the back, eyes half closed, saying nothing. At the lake now, aside from the Li and Fei families, only the small families from the eastern and northern shores remained. All greeted the Li family respectfully. The Fei family stood to the side, hesitant and uncertain. After a short wait, a man in white robes flew down from the dawn cloudliner. Dressed in ornate garments with a splendid crown, he descended from the ship with a faint smile and presented a jade seal. He parted his lips lightly and spoke. By the immortal order of the sect, Yunwu Peak's period of governance has ended. Moongaze Lake and the eastern banks, including the Lixia families, are henceforth placed under the jurisdiction of Moon Lake Peak. The crowd fell into a thunderous bow and responded in unison. Greetings to the emissary of the immortal sect. Good. As expected, it's the Moon Lake Peak, thought Li Zijian. Li Zijian led the response, but inwardly he caught several layers of implication. Since the Zhao family broke away and took most of Lixia Prefecture with them, the region had been fractured. Now, judging from the emissary's words, what remained was to be carved off and attached to Moongaze Lake's domain. It wasn't a trivial matter. Though it technically made Moongaze Lake's territory larger, it wasn't really good news. After all, with the Zhao family nearby, these lands essentially belonged to them and were untouchable. As Li Zijian was deep in thought, the white-robed cultivator descended from the clouds and came forward with a gentle smile, reaching out to help him up, speaking kindly. My master is in seclusion, attempting a breakthrough and couldn't come in person. I am Zhao Tingui, first disciple of Moon Lake Peak. I've come on her behalf. No need for formality, Zijian. Naturally, the Peak master in seclusion referred to Ningguan. The two families were indeed close, and Zhao Tingui carried himself with a humble demeanor, smiling as he urged Li Zijian to rise. Li Zijian didn't dare be careless and returned the courtesy. Only then did Zhao Tingui return to the ship above and speak softly. My visit this time follows a sect order. We are to conscript cultivators. His smile faded gradually, though his tone remained polite. He looked toward the surrounding minor families and said gently, this military conscription concerns territories assigned to me and my fellow brothers at Moon Lake Peak. Our merit and lives are at stake. Do not think to fob me off with cultivators bearing various unrefined qi. He paused for a moment, then said in a soft tone, if I note which family's disciples are too poor in quality and return a few months later to conscript again, there will be blood. Zhao Tingui looked every bit the refined young gentleman, but his words were far from mild. Several nearby family heads exchanged nervous glances, all too frightened to speak. Zhao Tingui went on, if a family's disciples perform well and earn merit, I too will not withhold rewards. Not to mention, the battlefield offers great opportunities. You should put forth your most capable ones. Watching the scene unfold, Li Zijian knew full well, though Zhao Tingui seemed to be warning the minor families, his words were just as much meant for him. No matter how close their two families were, matters concerning life, death, and merit couldn't be taken lightly. Just as that thought crossed his mind, a group of disciples in blue robes descended from the cloudliner. Zhao Tingui waved his hand and said softly, each of you, bring your assigned people aboard. Then he turned toward Li Zijian, came closer with great politeness, and extended a hand as white as jade, saying, Zijian, let us discuss this thoroughly. The two descended into the peak together and sat down in a grand hall built of white jade. After exchanging a few polite pleasantries, Zhao Tingui casually said, I wonder how many Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators your esteemed family can spare. Li Zijian sighed and replied softly, I'm sure you know, Tingui. Most of our seniors and brothers have likely already headed north. Zhao Tingui couldn't allow him to dodge so easily, thinking to himself, sure, Li Xuanfeng and Li Zijai are making contributions, but not on behalf of Moon Lake Peak. If I could secure even one of them, I wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I could relax in the sect with peace of mind. Why would I need to come all this way otherwise? He quickly raised a hand, his expression turning solemn as he said gravely, Zijian, you're a clever man and our families are close. I won't speak in circles with you. Zhao Tingui gently set down his teacup. Elder Qinghang must be deployed. I don't know about others, but she might well rival our Peak's core disciples. And being of the Thunder Dao lineage, she's perfectly suited for a post of defense. Li Zijian pondered for a moment and gave a slight nod. Zhao Tingui paused briefly, then continued gently, we'll also need one mid-stage and one early-stage Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator to establish a foothold first. Zhao Tingui had already made his calculations. Li Ziming of the Li family was likely a mid-stage Foundation establishment realm cultivator and a rare alchemist. If he could bring him to the northern front, it would reduce casualties significantly. Li Zijin thought for a while, then replied, reporting to the emissary, "My family has a Buddhist guest cultivator, a master monk, whose strength more than equals a mid-stage Foundation establishment realm cultivator. We also have a mid-stage demonic cultivator, though lacking lineage and spell arts. His combat power is at least equivalent to an early-stage Foundation establishment realm cultivator." Zhao Tingui showed brief surprise, then frowned and asked, "What of Taoist Ziming?" "He's in seclusion, attempting a breakthrough. He won't be available anytime soon." Li Zijin gave a gentle excuse. Zhao Tingui sighed as he heard it and could only say, "Very well, there's no need to rush. Let's proceed as you suggest for now. But if the front becomes critical, we may still need Taoist Ziming to act. If things truly become dire, we might even have to trouble you, Zijin." He agreed. Li Zijin nodded politely and said, "Of course." Zhao Tingui acknowledged with a nod, then said with hesitation, "As for the Qi cultivation and embryonic breathing realm cultivators, the Ning family has already been assigned elsewhere. The main burden will fall upon your esteemed family." Though Li Zijin had anticipated this, unease still rose within him. He thought to himself, the Kai family truly squeezes out every drop of value. Among all the families, the Li family had one of the largest pools of low-level cultivators. They were especially generous with outsiders, freely sharing cultivation methods. Li Zijin believed that Kai Jian would undoubtedly be tempted by this and simply asked, "How many cultivators are required?" Zhao Tingui replied awkwardly, 5 late-stage, 7 mid-stage, 27 early-stage Qi cultivation realm cultivators, and 100 embryonic breathing realm cultivators. All must be of orthodox spiritual alignment." "What?" exclaimed Li Zijin. Chapter 746, Parting Eye. Li Zijin felt a chill rise in his heart. This single conscription request would nearly empty out the Li family. After calculating carefully, he realized the numbers had been set with precision, exactly 70% of their available cultivators. He almost instinctively reacted, unable to hide his displeasure, and blurted out, "What?" Zhao Tingui could only respond with an awkward chuckle. Li Zijin quickly composed himself and said softly, "Forgive my..." Zhao Tingui quickly waved it off with a faintly apologetic look. He didn't want to offend the Li family, but these people had to be taken. With lives and legacies on the line, no amount of courtesy or sentiment could change that. He simply drank his tea in silence. Seeing his stance, Li Zijin had no choice but to speak up himself, softly, "Honored emissary. There's truly no justification for this. Even the average esteemed family wouldn't face such a sweeping draft. Our family stands guard over Moongaze Lake, bearing the brunt of impact and serving as a barrier for Azure Pond sect. I ask that you consider this carefully." Though Zhao Tingui was Moon Lake Peak's senior disciple, he came from a humble mortal background and had only been taken as a disciple by Ning Wan through a stroke of luck. Now a loyal follower of the Ning family, he feared no ordinary esteemed family, but even so, facing the Li family, he felt some apprehension and simply said, "I am merely carrying out orders." The two sides remained at an impasse for a while. Though Li Zijin hadn't known exactly which peak would send an envoy, he had done his homework on the likely candidates. Recognizing Zhao Tingui, he sensed hesitation in the man, which meant there was room to maneuver. He thought he came from humble roots, and it was his talent and disposition that earned Ning Wan's favor. He's smooth with people and not without kindness. If I apply the right pressure, there may be room to negotiate. Li Zijin gradually fell silent. Zhao Tingui pondered a moment, then finally gritted his teeth and said, "Our two families do have a long-standing bond, so I'll speak plainly. There are 2 conditions." He spoke in a low, serious tone. "Your family's core bloodline, especially those of your own generation, should accompany the expedition." The moment these words left his mouth, Li Zijin understood, so that's what this is really about. Zhao Tingui's calculations were focused here. If the Li family's core bloodline went to the battlefield, then should anything happen, the Li family would be compelled to intervene. And those not under Moon Lake Peak's control, like Li Xunfeng and Li Zijai, would be even less likely to stand idle. And once those two were drawn in, if the situation escalated further, it could even prompt the Yang and Zhao families to intervene as well. Li Zijin saw the situation clearly and sighed inwardly. If Zhao Tingui had come prepared, then his intentions were all the more evident. He thought, it seems Yuexiang must go as well. Li Yuexiang was Li Zijai's younger sister, and from how Li Xunfeng had acted during the Yuan family incident, it was clear she held a special place in his heart. Zhao Tingui had surely calculated this and was aiming to ensure she went along. After a moment's thought, Li Zijin nodded silently and gave the order, "Go, summon Yuexiang." Seeing Li Zijin's action, Zhao Tingui's expression brightened slightly as he continued, "There is another matter. I've heard your esteemed family possesses a herb called the Wanglin Blossom that soothes sorrow and extends life. If your family could provide it for 6 of my junior brothers, I would be deeply grateful." It wasn't an unreasonable request. Li Zijin had already reserved some for his direct lineage, though it would be a bit tight to give some away now. Their stock could still last a year or two. He nodded slightly. Zhao Tingui looked genuinely pleased and said, "On behalf of my junior brothers, I thank your esteemed family." Li Zijin's thoughts, however, were still on the arrangements for his family. Zhao Tingui paused briefly, then continued, "Back to the matter of personnel. If your family is strained, you needn't send quite as many at once. 4 late-stage, 4 mid-stage, 19 early-stage Qi cultivation realm cultivators, and 80 embryonic breathing realm cultivators. How does that sound?" Li Zijin understood this was the result of dual compromise and could only sigh. If the sect has issued the order, the Li family shall naturally obey. As they spoke, a young woman entered the courtyard. She had willowy brows and almond eyes, wore a flowing white dress, and carried a longsword at her waist. She seemed to have just finished a cultivation session as traces of golden-red flame still flickered across her form. Li Zijin said softly, "This is my younger sister, Li Yuexiang. This is the emissary of Moon Lake Peak, Senior Zhao Tingui." Zhao Tingui glanced at her and returned the gesture with a formal salute. Though Li Zijin already knew her answer, he still turned to his sister and asked, "Our family is to serve under Moon Lake Peak, but we still lack a strong enough core bloodline representative. Yuexiang, would you be willing to take on this duty?" Li Yuexiang simply smiled and said, "I've been idle at home long enough. It's good to finally be of use." "Arrange as you see fit, brother." Li Zijin let the two formally exchange greetings, then turned to Zhao Tingui with a smile and said, "Do not underestimate the women of our family, emissary. Yuexiang is not some delicate lady of the boudoir. She will be of great help in the north." Zhao Tingui quickly agreed. Li Yuexiang, after hearing their arrangement, responded gently, "I'll go now to assemble the people." She left swiftly. Zhao Tingui took a glance at her departing figure and sipped his tea. Li Zijin, deep in thought, spoke softly, "Yuexiang is our youngest sister. We brothers all cherish her dearly. I ask that the emissary look after her." After all, Li Yuexiang's presence already signaled the Li family's intent to support. Naturally, they would intervene if something happened. Li Zijin had no intention of letting this man treat her like a mere pawn. His words carried a subtle warning as he said, "My little sister is in your hands, Taoist friend." Zhao Tingui simply replied, "Rest assured, Zijin, I am not such a base man. If anything happens to Taoist Yuexiang, you may hold me personally accountable." "Good, then I ask that the emissary go with her to choose people from the family," said Li Zijin. Zhao Tingui nodded and took his leave, leaving Li Zijin alone in the hall. After a moment's contemplation, he refilled his teacup and murmured, "Zhao Tingui is still unmarried, and he's only 39. The Ning family has reportedly broached marriage talks several times, but he declined each time, citing cultivation as his priority. He did not believe for a moment that Zhao Tingui's glance had been one of lust. Nor could he imagine that someone who had risen from a humble mortal household, who had boarded the Ning family's vessel, and carved his way to become the head disciple of Moon Lake Peak through sheer talent and tenacity, would pine for beauty in his presence. It was, at most, a signal, nothing more. If one seeks background and temperament, or beauty and talent, my little sister is indeed a match for him. A flicker of coldness passed through his handsome eyes as he recalled Zhao Tingui's subtle message, thinking, he's striking the mountain to shake the tiger, advancing and retreating with control, killing 3 birds with 1 stone and balancing personal and political matters. A capable man indeed, but it all depends on what Yuexiang thinks. Once she's spent time with him and sees his true character, she'll know where she stands. Chapter 747, Parting II. News of the Celestial Sect's decree had spread earlier, and the Li family had received word internally as well. Now that the Dawn Cloudliner had arrived and several esteemed family leaders descended the mountain, the message was perfectly clear. Li Yuexiang descended the mountain to meet Li Qinglao, who was overwhelmed with tasks. Only when his aunt landed gracefully did he hurry forward to greet her. They want 19 early-stage Qi cultivation realm cultivators, and they have to be orthodox cultivators. Can't be substandard, said Li Yuexiang. After reviewing the numbers, Li Qinglao realized that even if they filled the list without her surnames, a few of their own brothers would still need to go. Not to mention, they needed to leave some power behind for the esteemed house. If there were too few cultivators with the Li surname, Zhao Tingui likely wouldn't be satisfied. Njian Li Chengchu, Chen Mufeng Li Wen. These will cover the late-stage Qi cultivation realm cultivators. Li Minggong Li Chengyu. He finished the list. Li Yuexiang reviewed it and found the arrangement sound. And Siwei from their own family was being left behind and their own core line had contributions. She asked, with these people sent out, what strength remains in the family? Elder Chen and others remain. As for the Radiant Lure generation, only Cheng Huai and Cheng Xi, who is stationed at the Eastern Sea, are left. Most others with decent cultivation will be sent out. Li Yuexiang replied softly, nodding, your arrangements are sound. Go ahead and summon them. Li Qinglao nodded. Then Li Yuexiang said softly, in my view, the northern campaign won't be easy. As time drags on, more rounds of conscription will follow. They won't rest until all the major families are hollowed out. Watch over the household, we may need to send more later. Li Qinglio understood and took out several storage pouches, saying, all provisions and pills are prepared here. Take care, Aunt. As the two were speaking, those summoned had gathered outside the hall. Li Yuexiang stepped out of the inner hall and saw Zhao Tingui descending on a breeze. Just as Zhao Tingui left Mount Qingdu, thoughts had already begun stirring in his heart. I've seen Li Zijai before. He is refined, noble, undeniably worthy of an esteemed family's core bloodline. We never spoke, but Li Zijun, he's truly a hard man to deal with. Zhao Tingui had met many people in the sect, including the likes of Yu Muxian, and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Moongaze Lake really is a land of talent and destiny. How many figures have emerged from here over the past century? Nearly every storm of the era seems to touch this place. Returning to his senses and looking at the two, Zhao Tingui, always courteous in speech, simply said, "Greetings, Taoist friends." Li Yuexiang replied respectfully. Zhao Tingui immediately looked over the gathered cultivators below, pointed out a few to be replaced, added new ones, checked the list twice, and asked, "Your family has very few who cultivate wood or earth Dao, but quite a few thunder Dao cultivators." He smiled and continued without waiting for a response. "It matters little. I have 2 junior brothers who specialize in wood and earth. They'll fill the gap. Thunder cultivators, however, are rare and valuable." Li Yuexiang smiled faintly. Zhao Tingui said nothing more, only spoke softly, "Then let it be settled. Submit the list to me. Boarding begins in 4 hours. Please allow the family's disciples time to bid farewell to their families." Li Yuexiang turned and looked at the disciples below. Most wore complex expressions, though a few seemed eager. She addressed them. "This journey is a matter of life and death and of opportunity. Go now and bid your families farewell. In 1 hour, gather at the Dawn Cloudliner in Milin Prefecture." The crowd responded in unison and dispersed. Li Yuexiang went to the peak to pay respects to her parents and bid farewell to her brother. Li Zijun handed her a few talismans and said quietly, "Above all, protect your own safety first. I've spoken with Zhao Tingui, he will see to your well-being." Zhao Tingui gestured for her to proceed. After bidding farewell, Li Yuexiang left with him toward the Cloudliner. The area was filled with mourning and gloom. On the vast vessel, few faces looked pleasant. Moonlake Peak had shown courtesy to the Li family, but to the smaller families, they had simply taken people by force. After all, asking these minor families one by one would take until tomorrow, and the ship didn't have the manpower to spare. The area echoed with weeping. These people practiced crude techniques. Among a whole group of elders, they couldn't muster 3 proper spell arts. For them, heading north likely meant working to death. As for killing enemies and earning treasures, not only was it unclear if they could kill any, even if they did, whether they'd be allowed to keep what they got was uncertain. All they could hope was that Moonlake Peak acted with fairness. Zhao Tingui, seeing all this clearly, deliberately raised his voice. "Fellow Taoists, Sioux State is not like Jiangnan. Do not despair. Sioux State is unlike any other region. It is filled with opportunity." As the highest-ranking figure present, once he spoke, all eyes turned to him. He smiled and said, "Sioux State is a land of constant strife, filled with countless spirit husk cave dwelling in chaotic spiritual aura. The demonic, Buddhist, and immortal Taos clash endlessly. The Great Void itself is a storm. Its aura shifts multiple times a day, triggering countless opportunities. Now, neither the Purple Mansion realm cultivators see it clearly nor Maha can divine it. Omens everywhere. Grotto heavens open and close, ancient ruins rise. Rain falls as jade, the earth rolls with gold and stone. Pristine waters shimmer." As he spoke, many faces changed and greed began to show. Zhao Tingui smiled and added, "You've all come, why wallow in gloom? Better to strive with all your might and seize your chance. Perhaps after a year you'll return riding the wind, as Foundation Establishment Realm or even Purple Mansion Realm cultivators." Li Yuexiang quietly shook her head. Reaching the Foundation Establishment Realm was still possible, but reaching Purple Mansion Realm just from a trip to Sioux State was pure fantasy. Yet many below were tempted, murmuring questions about spiritual aura, which they didn't even understand. Zhao Tingui, hearing a few confused questions, explained, "A region's spiritual aura is the flow of its spiritual energy. Scope may be vast or narrow, and often aligns with symbolic essences like metallic essence, allowing it to resonate with certain grotto heavens or cause fated opportunities to manifest. The more chaotic the area, the smaller and more frequent the changes. For instance, in a condition like falling water rising storm, it's easier to connect with a thunder arts grotto heaven. Sioux State now changes 3 times a day, with 9 types in one region. Naturally, there will be many opportunities." The crowd stirred with chatter. Some began asking what metallic essence was. Zhao Tingui realized this line of explanation could go on forever, but the atmosphere had improved, so he stopped speaking. Li Yuexiang watched quietly. A few of the younger cultivators showed promising talent and bright, eager eyes tinged with hope. When the times change, all hope to be the dragon or serpent that rises from the land, thought Li Yuexiang. Not just the young, though sorrowful, few among the gathered lacked some sliver of hope. Each dreamed of perhaps being the one destined for greatness in this era. At Mount Baiyanian, danger and opportunity walked hand in hand. Who knew what spells, dharma artifacts, resources, or pills one might stumble upon? After a while, her family members gathered. The cloudliner began to move, and Mount Kindu slowly disappeared from view. Soon, the scenery beneath began to shift. Desert villages, jagged stones, fields full of bones, and flickering dharma light could be seen from above. Only when the great river appeared below did Li Yuexiang begin to feel she had truly left home. Just as Zhao Tingui had described, the world grew misty. To the east, the fog shimmered gold like a blazing sun. To the south, it was heavier. It was cold and ominous, with no visible boundary. My brothers always sought to shield me, leaving no place for my... At last, I have a chance to contribute. She felt no fear, only a quiet sense of peace. She gazed silently northward until Mount Baiyanian appeared on the horizon. Then her expression grew complicated, thinking there should be a Zhenhui temple on that mountain. Zhenhui temple was not well known, and now reduced to ruins, but in the hearts of the Li family, it stood equal to the southern border. In the midst of a mountain ravine, she thought she could just make it out and stared for a long time. Chapter 748, Chuoba I. Sioux State. The cultivators of Azurpan sect had gradually gathered, while in the north only the occasional streaks of devilish and colorful light flashed by like flying shuttles, hidden deep in thick haze, making it impossible to see clearly. But Li Zijai had received word that both Buddhist cultivators and devil cultivators from the north were gradually arriving in Sioux State. The 7 Daos, 3 had already come, and even the Yan State had sent a group of devil cultivators, all silently surveying the surroundings. Mount Baiyanian was shrouded in mist. Li Zijai had been stationed here for several days and had learned much. He and Li Xunfeng were both guarding the eastern flank, not too far and not too close from their Moongaze Lake. We are stationed in this area. Those minor Buddhist and devil cultivators coming down from the south are of little consequence. The main forces we must face are 2. The Dao of Great Desire and the Chuoba family of devil cultivators from Yan State. Li Zijai's strength was already quite formidable. Ordinary cultivators couldn't keep him in check. Only Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators from these 2 immortal sect could truly threaten his life, so he paid extra attention to them. The Baixiang Valley I'm heading to is often frequented by devil cultivators, and even direct descendants of the Chuoba family have made appearances there. He checked the time. Cultivators from the rear should be arriving soon. After landing in the formation, he watched the comings and goings of cultivators, and after a moment found Yang Ruizhou. His brother-in-law was seated upright in the courtyard, holding a small letter in his hand, frowning deeply. Seeing Li Zijai approach, Yang Ruizhou quickly flipped his hand to put the letter away, stepped forward and said softly, "Zijai, the assignments for each peak have been issued and the cloudliners should have already arrived. I wonder how things are at home." Li Zijai hurried to ask, and Yang Ruizhou responded, "Moongaze Lake was assigned to the Moon Lake Peak of the Ning family. Though it's technically a return to its rightful owners, I heard the Ning family pulled a lot of strings to force out several ambitious immortal peaks. As expected, it fell into the hands of Moon Lake Peak." Li Zijai had somewhat anticipated this and instantly felt a headache coming on. He thought to himself, but the Ning family already has their hands full with staffing Yuanxing Peak and Cave Spring Peak, and now they've added Moon Lake Peak on top of that. How will they have enough manpower? The Ning family is short on manpower. To guard all these territories, they'll surely need to draw heavily from my family's forces. Li Zijai gave it a brief thought and quickly gained a clear grasp of the situation. It all became evident to him. Moon Lake Peak of the Ning family got Moongaze Lake just as they wished. This must be Kai Jian's deliberate scheme. With the Ning family short on manpower, they'll inevitably offend my family by heavily demanding reinforcements. If the Ning family fails to defend the place and people die, they'll be severely punished by the sect and secretly blame our family for not putting in enough effort. Meanwhile, if our dispatched members suffer casualties, the Ning family will just come asking for more reinforcements. Resentment in our household will be inevitable. He found the whole thing rather thorny as he thought, shifting Azurpan sect's internal conflict onto the families. What a troublesome move. With Li Zijin at home, Li Zijai wasn't truly afraid of open conflict with Moon Lake Peak. He just needed to see how far they could compromise. After all, if the Ning family couldn't hold the land, his own family wouldn't benefit either. Li Zijai understood this clearly and stayed silent for a moment. Yang Ruizhou was still reading the letter with furrowed brows, speaking in a low voice. As for the sect's other territories, grievances are running high. Yet the Ning family wants to send people here to borrow manpower from us. What kind of logic is that? Azurpan sect had divided territories among the peaks, allowing each to conscript people to head north. Initially, the command was to conscript 40 to 50%. The peaks accepted the orders and set out by boat, but upon arriving at the territories, they found vast stretches to defend. Except for a few peaks of major families from large commanderies, almost none had enough people. They had no choice but to increase conscription to 60 or 70%. Smaller families with no backing were pushed to the point of sending 80 to 90% of their cultivators, with some migrating entire families. Li Zijai was aware of these reports. He had seen much sorrow and hardship in the formations these past days. After a moment of silence, he quietly said, "The sect mainly values the Eastern Sea. Many fellow disciples are still guarding the islands there and haven't been recalled. Naturally, there's a shortage of manpower everywhere." Yang Ruizhou understood what he meant and softly said, "In the past few days, many cultivators have voiced complaints, but this mountain simply must be held. If the Buddhist and devil cultivators cross the Great River, they may not be able to breach Mount Azure Pond, but the bloody storm will surely engulf most of Jiangnan." Li Zijai nodded. He had gotten the information he needed and said simply, "I'll head out for Beixiang Valley now. I came to say farewell." Yang Ruizhou had been assigned elsewhere, and upon hearing this, he quickly stood up with a solemn expression and said softly, "I've already asked around about Beixiang Valley for you. It directly faces the Chuoba family's territory. That family has been orthodox devil cultivators since ancient times, and even produced a golden core devil monarch. Though they've declined terribly, even a broken ship still has iron. Be extremely careful. With your cultivation, as long as you stay cautious, you should avoid any serious harm." Li Zijai had also made his own inquiries. He nodded silently, bid a peaceful farewell, and rode the wind into the skies, leaving Mount Yan behind and heading east. After traveling a few hundred kilometers, the sky suddenly brightened, pouring glaring light across them. Li Zijai dimmed his rainbow light and flew over several cities to the south, slowly spotting a gorge ahead. The gorge was filled with golden yellow maple trees. Several escape lights drifted from north to south across the sky, and formations below glowed with light. Li Zijai descended with a stream of heavenly glow, arriving just as a few devil cultivator-looking figures were snooping around the formation's edge. As Li Zijai landed, his concealment techniques were superb. The group noticed nothing and continued moving through the grove below. He simply flicked his sleeve, releasing several streams of heavenly glow. The glow had brilliantly colored, softly drifting through the forest, spiraling a few times before darting toward each of the men. Those at the rear couldn't react in time and were instantly bound tight, immobilized and tumbling to the ground. The ones in front turned back alertly, but with only embryonic breathing realm cultivation, they couldn't withstand it and fell one after another like rolling gourds. Only the leader had mid-stage chi cultivation realm cultivation. He reacted faster, drawing a Dharma sword that shimmered with red light, blocking the oncoming glow with a reverse slash. Clang. With a crisp sound, the leading devil cultivator staggered from the impact. The rainbow light recoiled just an inch, then lunged forward again. What is this thing? Could it be spell art? This devil cultivator was from Zhao State and had spent the first half of his life dueling Buddhist cultivators. He had never seen an immortal cultivator before and froze for a full breath, during which a figure stepped into view, treading on heavenly glow. Crap. The figure flashed before his eyes for only an instant, then his sword vanished from his hand and landed in the other's. Just as fear struck him, his body was already tightly bound, unable to even activate his escape light. Li Zijai examined the Dharma artifact he took. It was indeed unbearably crude, forged from blood chi and soul remnants. It emitted a faint, bloody glow in his hand, but had nothing worth praising. Chapter 749, Chuoba II. Li Zijai rode the heavenly glow to the front of the formation, the captured men still bound behind him. Using a command token to activate the formation, he saw an unbelievably small marketplace nestled in the valley. A few figures rode the wind to welcome him. This marketplace consisted of no more than a few courtyards. It was extremely crude in appearance. The formation looked newly set, likely placed by Azure Pond sect. As the group reached him, they all bowed deeply. Li Zijai examined them. One was at the mid-stage of the chi cultivation realm, 3 were early stage, and the rest were only at the embryonic breathing realm. How pitiful. He felt somewhat troubled as these cultivators of Beixiang Valley were so overjoyed they hadn't slept for days, each of them eagerly addressing him as peak master. The mid-stage chi cultivation realm old man seemed to be the overseer of Beixiang Valley. He was moved and emotional, saying, "Peak master, sir. I've long heard that Jiangnan is a flourishing land of immortal cultivation. To come such a long way to aid us, I am deeply grateful. Please accept my bow." Li Zijai was momentarily stunned. After asking a few questions, he realized all of them were surnamed Bai. They were the local cultivators of Su State. Apart from establishing a formation in Beixiang Valley, no other Azure Pond cultivators had arrived yet. He chuckled and shook his head, letting out a breath of relief and thought, of course. Beixiang Valley is a crucial defensive point. They wouldn't leave just a few chi cultivation realm disciples for me. I've just grown too wary after being schemed against by the Kai family. With the rest yet to arrive, Li Zijai wasn't in a rush to interrogate the devil cultivators. He had them clear out some rooms and waited quietly. Just as the night passed, 2 escape lights flew in, one ahead and one behind. First came a white-haired old man, neatly dressed, looking even older than Li Xuanxuan. He was in the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm and appeared to be about 100 years old. This meant he was likely over 200 by cultivator standards. The old man cupped his hands in greeting. Right after, a middle-aged man with mid-stage Foundation establishment realm cultivation, neatly groomed beard, stepped forward and said loudly, "I am Kuan Yi of Ling Peak." "Greetings to you both, fellow Taoists." The old man followed with a hoarse voice, "Yu Yue of Panky Peak. I have 3 disciples. They will arrive one by one in the coming days." Li Zijai didn't know Kuan Yi well, but he did recognize the Yu family and Panky Peak. He nodded and smiled, "Changshan Peak, Li Zijai." After exchanging names, Li Zijai pointed to the devil cultivators on the ground and said, "2 seniors. I arrived a bit earlier and happened to run into this group of devil cultivators skulking around. I brought them back on the way." Kuan Yi gave a small smile and said, "I know a few spell arts that are just right for interrogation." He conjured a pale blue flame, pressed it to the captive's forehead, and began questioning in a low voice. After about 5 minutes, he said in disappointment, "Just a petty scavenger trying to take advantage of the chaos. They are not from the Chuoba family." As he withdrew and stood up, the man before him slumped to the ground in a daze. The surrounding devil cultivators looked increasingly terrified, but they were still sealed by heavenly glow and unable to move. Li Zijai, ever thorough, casually picked up the devil cultivator's storage pouch. After rummaging through it, he found nothing more than some blood qi, tattered clothing, and a few worn-out cultivation manuals. Inside the clothing was a hidden letter. He opened it in front of the 2 others, but it was nothing more than a family letter with handwriting that were blurred and aged. Kuan Yi turned away in disappointment. The 3 of them clearly understood where the true threat in this region lay. Yu Yue gently shook his head and stroked his beard, saying, "Fellow Taoist. If these were truly spies from the Chuoba family, they would never leave behind anything incriminating. The Chuoba are extremely skilled in manipulating souls. It's difficult to detect. Even though Azure Ponsek's techniques are excellent, I fear we still fall short of their level." These words didn't give Kuan Yi much face, but he didn't mind. He nodded, seemingly enlightened, and casually slapped the captives to death. The captives let out a brief gasp of terror before their lives were snuffed out. Only then did he smile and say, "I was too rash. Senior, you're well experienced, having served as peak master for many years and coming from an esteemed family. Could you explain a bit more about the Chuoba family?" Yu Yue nodded slightly and said, "The Chuoba family has a grand background. Though they are now in decline, they were once a first-class great family." "Are you aware of how Northern Qi replaced Wei, and then Great Liang destroyed Qi?" Both nodded. When Yu Yue mentioned the rise of Northern Qi over Wei, Kuan Yi cast a subtle glance at Li Zijai. Yu Yue continued softly, "Emperor Taiwu of Liang was surnamed Chuoba with given name Xuantan. So they were once the imperial family of the northern dynasties," muttered Kuan Yi as his expression grew increasingly grim. He was clearly shaken by the name. Li Zijai hadn't expected the Chuoba background to be this deep either and fell into silent thought. Yu Yue continued softly, "Later, the Emperor of Liang perished and the lesser Yang devil monarch died as well. Great Liang reached its peak and then fell hard. With Great Liang's territory shattered, the Chuoba family suffered heavy losses. Only by relying on the Shingle Heaven did they recover slowly over the years. Now they have re-established themselves in Yan State. They even have a grotto heaven." Kuan Yi looked at the 2 with a complicated expression, calculating with his fingers before speaking in a low voice. "With the 3 of us plus Senior's 3 disciples, if the Chuoba family sends just 1 person, we might be able to fend them off. But if 3 or 5 come, resisting would be pointless. Better to face punishment than lose our lives." Yu Yue laughed heartily and patted him on the shoulder, saying, "Fellow Taoist, you worry too much. So many years have passed. The Chuoba family is no longer what it once was. Even if they have a few prodigies left, they wouldn't send them to a place like this. If just hearing a surname is enough to shake us, then there are countless more people surnamed Lei Fuki Chuoba than Zai or Wang." Kuan Yi merely waved his hand and nodded in reply. "What you say is true, Senior, but my heart still feels uneasy." His mood never picked up. After a few perfunctory words, he found a side room to rest. With 2 calls, the family head-looking elder of Baixiang Valley hurriedly offered up his own cave dwelling. The old man, however, took the opportunity to slowly approach Li Zijai. Yu Yue asked, "Fellow Taoist Zijai, are you from the Li family of Moongaze Lake?" Seeing Li Zijai nod, Yu Yue smiled and said, "What a coincidence." Li Zijai looked slightly puzzled, then saw the old man continue leisurely. "Back in the day, the Yu and Ning families were quite close. Some from the Ning family cultivated on Panky Peak. By seniority, one of them was my martial uncle. Later, when the position of Moonlake Peak Master became vacant, my uncle took the seat. While cultivating over the lake, flying by on the wind, he once saw a woman at the embryonic breathing realm. She was very beautiful." He chuckled and continued. He was quite the romantic and quickly fell in love with her. They spent a passionate night and he couldn't let her go, so he brought her back to the sect. It was quite the scandal. There were many nights of indulgence and much gossip. In the end, the woman's talent was too poor and she died young. Before her death, she entrusted her family to him. My uncle agreed, but after he died, Moonlake Peak saw it as a scandal and barely took care of her brother. Yu Yue looked up, as if reminiscing, and murmured, "I believe his name was Lu Sisi, wasn't it?" "Have you heard of him, Taoist?" Li Zijai fell silent and said softly, "I've heard the name. Chapter 750, Husband and Wife I, Lu Sisi." Of course Li Zijai had heard that name. The internal and external family histories both have records of this man. After the elder finished speaking, Li Zijai silently pondered, ancient matters from long ago. Why bring them up again? Things with no meaning now. What exactly is Yu Yue trying to say? Yu Yue paused for a moment, then steered the conversation back with a smile, saying, "Just idle chatter. Back then our families were closely allied and my family was united. Times have changed. We've lost contact with the Ning family. I merely asked when I heard that Moonlake Peak had fallen into their hands." He cupped his hands respectfully, then slowly withdrew, finding a small courtyard to cultivate in. Li Zijai listened with a thoughtful expression. He also found a quiet courtyard and sat down peacefully, thinking, could he be warning me that the Ning family is untrustworthy? Matters between the two families hinge on uncle. I have a decent grasp of the situation. This kind of reminder, it's his way of extending a subtle courtesy. Thinking it through, with the deaths of Li Tongye and Li Yunjiao, ties between the Li and Xiao families had grown distant. As long as the Li family faithfully guarded the west for them, there was little interaction. The Xiao family had since sealed their mountain and grown ever more reclusive. They were once close with the Yuan family, but that too grew distant and eventually broke off. The Li family then gravitated toward the Ning and Yang families. Their political alignment had shifted over the course of a century, no more. Such is the way of the world. Closeness and distance eventually turned to separation. If I hadn't personally handled the Kingsui Peak affair, we might have broken with the Yuan family outright. Love and enmity fade in an instant. Human sentiment is hollow, like standing atop a needle's point. A faint gloom rose in his heart as he reflected. The Ning family has long been loyal to the Kai family. For hundreds of years, they likely had relations with families like mine and the Yu family. Yet now, all that has vanished. Would the Kai family simply sit by? Their deep resentment toward the Li family, it probably ties back to this. With Yuansu's death, the Ning family has grown weaker, and now they're being pushed into conflict with my family. It's not a good look. Things are still manageable for now, but if the situation becomes urgent, something is bound to happen. The stars and moon had risen in the sky. Li Zijai sat upright in the courtyard, dust thick on the windowsill. His eyes shone like stars, and one hand rested on the stone table as he murmured inwardly, "It all hinges on uncle. Ning Heiyuan is two-faced, and Ning Heijing is a trusted agent of the Kai family. When there's no harmony in interests and no depth in sentiment, how can anything last?" Sioux State, Mount Yan Pass. Traveling north from Moongaze Lake into Sioux State and crossing the Great River, one would reach Mount Yan Pass. This place was already close to the Golden Tang Gate. Looking up, one could faintly glimpse golden light atop the distant peaks. Of course, the Golden Tang Gate was now tightly sealed. Nothing remained but Mount Golden Tang itself. Li Qinghong flew out of the pass on a bolt of thunderlight, seeing only endless golden light, while roiling devil smoke surged from the distant horizon. Directly across from Mount Yan Pass were the forces of the Tao of Great Desire and various devil cultivators. The land before the pass was vast, with a long defensive line. For months now, the devil cultivators had been growing restless. This was one of the most fiercely contested fronts in all of Azure Pond Sect's defenses. She had been stationed here for several months, and the probing skirmishes were growing increasingly frequent. King Heng and Li Wuxiao had been reassigned elsewhere and were no longer at her side. Among the cultivators under Li Qinghong's command, only Li Minggong and Chen Mufeng were from her own household. An old acquaintance was also present, Fei Tongyu of the Fei family, who, despite being the family head, had been dispatched here and now stood quietly in a corner. The rest were a mix of cultivators from various families. This arrangement had only one purpose: to prevent cowardice or inaction in the face of danger. The great families had been deliberately mixed across the defensive lines, forcing every segment to support one another without bias. Li Qinghong closely observed the devil smoke to the north. It was far more massive than previous scouting waves. She took out the jade ring issued to her and saw it glowing entirely red with only a few dim white spots. "Take your positions in the formation. Prepare to engage." She gave a command and pulled a spear from her storage pouch. The other cultivators hurried into formation. As she focused her gaze, a dozen figures emerged from the black smoke. The Qi cultivation realm devil cultivators were of no concern. Her attention was fixed on the pair leading them. The pair was husband and wife, both at Foundation Establishment realm. The woman was gentle and charming, her aura clearly at the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. She held a delicate brocade fan. The man appeared cold and aloof, wielding a blade and possessing slightly stronger cultivation. He was likely at the mid-stage of the Foundation establishment realm. The couple led their devils to the formation's edge. The woman flicked her snow-white robe and said with a smile, "Taoist ahead. May I ask which branch of Azure Pond sect you hail from?" Li Qinghang stared at them coldly without replying. The couple's subordinates weren't idle. They cast spell arts at the formation. Soon, black-clad figures emerged at their feet, devil cultivators of the embryonic breathing realm, who took quite some time to reach the front line. Though outnumbered, the defenders within the formation counterattacked under its protection. Thunderous blasts erupted. The devil cultivator couple noticed no response from Foundation establishment realm defenders and thought to themselves, could it be that no Foundation establishment realm cultivators are currently inside the formation? They immediately launched their Dharma artifacts. Li Qinghang couldn't allow them to attack unchecked, so she rose into the air and flew out from the formation. When the devil woman saw her appearance, her eyes lit up and she withdrew her artifact, calling out, "Taoist, Taoist, please wait." Li Qinghang flew using only mana, not revealing her foundation or true cultivation. She replied coldly, "Who's your fellow Taoist?" The man simply stared at her coldly, while the gentle devil woman laughed lightly and spoke, "In the end, we're all comrades of the devil Dao. Though our Dao lineages differ, the Purple Mansion and Golden Core Daos once belonged to devil cultivators as well. Why can't we address each other as Taoists?" Li Qinghang angled her spear, thunder gathering silently within its shaft. She gave no reply. The woman quickly spoke, "Taoist, you and I are both merely pawns. Why escalate things? Just send out half the cultivators in your formation, and I'll allow you to kill half my little devils. We'll report accordingly and call it even." Li Qinghang didn't believe a word. She merely laughed coldly. "Send them out, you wish." The gentle woman wasn't surprised. She exchanged a glance with her husband and said helplessly, "Taoist, how heartless. Why must things always come to violence?" Li Qinghang smiled brightly and replied, "The ones in my formation are my kin and comrades. I can't trade them like that, but how about I offer a spirit item in exchange for one of your devil heads?" Oh, the gentle woman and her husband exchanged a glance, thinking to themselves, even if we can't lure her into weakening the formation, there's no harm in at least seeing the treasure. Chapter 751, Husband and Wife II. So Liu Kaio smiled and said, "Wonderful, please, Taoist, let us see it. I am Liu Kaio, and this is my husband, Helian Chengguang. May we ask your name?" Li Qinghang had no intention of giving her name. She didn't believe the devil cultivator's introductions anyway. She simply pulled out a small point of white light and said softly, "Take a look, Taoist." The white light spun once in the air, then shot directly at the couple's faces. Liu Kaio's expression shifted, but Helian Chengguang seemed prepared. He flicked his sleeve and released a black cloud that wrapped tightly around them both. The flickering white light stopped in midair, hovering brilliantly. Li Qinghang frowned and asked, "What's the meaning of this?" Liu Kaio hesitated for a moment and moved her wrist as if to explain, but Helian Chengguang seized her wrist tightly, his face stern, and pulled her backward. He growled, "You may have fooled her, but not me." Before his words had even faded, the white light burst forth, expanding in the blink of an eye. Concentrated lightning exploded outward, shifting from pure white to violet white, then splintered into a torrential rain of lightning that lit up the sky with vibrant hues. Boom! Even the devil cultivators on the ground below were stunned and breathless. They had no choice but to raise their Dharma artifacts in defense as the lightning rain poured down. The cultivators within the formation seized the opportunity and unleashed a barrage of spells. Morale surged among the defenders. Li Qinghang also seized the moment. She drew her spear, and bolts of lightning formed avian shapes that flew into the crackling glow. Another thunderous boom resounded as Helian Chengguang burst from the lightning. Black chi rose around him while his face was cold and scorched with soot. He raised his blade to block the lightning and shouted, "Thunder Cultivator." Liu Kaio had fared worse. Her robe was charred black and blood was trickling from her mouth. She waved her brocade fan, stirring up a gust of dark wind, and said in a low voice, "Damn you, you wretched thing. Once I break your formation, I'll turn every one of your kin into blood food." Li Qinghang's almond-shaped eyes widened slightly. She said nothing, but silently committed the words to memory. Though the devil pair had suffered heavily from the exchange, they didn't retreat. They charged her together with black smoke billowing. Liu Kaio thought to herself, that power must have come from a talisman technique. Yet this woman doesn't understand the art of timing. She should have used it when exhausted to turn the tide. Wasting it early, how fortunate for us. Helian Chengguang was far more cautious. He secretly used mana to transmit a voice message. Kaior, could this woman be a direct descendant of a Purple Mansion realm cultivator? And a thunder cultivator at that? We should be careful. Liu Kaio dismissed the concern and replied, how could she be a direct descendant of a Purple Mansion realm without even a feathered robe? Besides, where in the mainland is there a great thunder cultivation family? She may be strong, but she must be carrying treasures. The two attacked Li Qinghang in tandem as they conversed. Her spear flickered with violet lightning, dispersing the black smoke with ease. After exchanging a few moves, she had already gauged them in her heart. Hellion Chengguang is quite powerful, while Liu Kaiou is weak and unfocused. They are clearly not on the same level. Hellion could match an esteemed descendant, but Liu Kaiou feels like a mere Foundation Establishment realm rogue cultivator. Her thunder spear danced through the air with practiced ease, blocking their attacks completely. Every now and then she'd suddenly thrust, forcing Liu Kaiou into narrow escapes and cold sweats. Frowning, Hellion Chengguang took out a skull-shaped artifact and tossed it into the air. Grey-red smoke billowed out, and beams of light shot from the skull's hollow eyes, enveloping the couple. Still feeling it wasn't enough, he retrieved a red agate from his storage pouch and suspended it at his side. It emitted beams of crimson light aimed at Li Qinghang's eyes. What a deep arsenal. Li Qinghang's eyes narrowed. Her family also practiced perception techniques. It was nothing too advanced, but decent enough to resist the glare without being heavily affected. Still, she could no longer strike at will, and her mind quickly calculated the shift in balance. The brocade fan and robe on the female cultivator were Foundation Establishment realm items. It was nothing outstanding, but still respectable. They clearly didn't match her strength. They were likely gifts from her Dao companion. Meanwhile, Hellion had consecutively taken out 2 Foundation Establishment realm Dharma artifacts. Though not top grade, they were clearly sufficient to reveal his identity. He was most likely a direct descendant of some devil family. Devil cultivators found it easier to forge Dharma artifacts compared to immortal sects, albeit they were lesser in quality. Even so, these 2 Foundation Establishment Dharma artifacts were already tipping the fight. One restricted Li Qinghang, while the other protected Hellion. They were slowly gaining the upper hand. After dozens of exchanges, Hellion noticed Li Qinghang hadn't taken out any artifacts or talismans. He breathed easier and assumed he had been overthinking it. His expression turned increasingly vicious. He pulled out a blood-colored glow from his pouch and said coldly, "You offered me a bolt of thunder, Taoist. Let me return the favor." He flicked his finger and the blood light fluttered twice in the air, expanding and unfolding as it descended like a fog. Blood dust was now raining down from the sky. The protective thunderlight around Li Qinghang was soon stained by the blood glow. Her movements grew heavy and her spear slower. She had no choice but to step back and shift from offense to defense. Boom! A muffled thunderclap rumbled through the clouds as violet light burst from Li Qinghang's eyes. Her immortal foundation, Profound Thunderpool, surged to its peak. It unleashed a blast of explosive lightning that forced the couple to stumble back a step. Her cheeks were flushed slightly, but she pressed on. Each strike of her spear sent violet arcs of lightning outward. She fought through the suppressive blood light, and her momentum became even fiercer than before. Hellion Chengguang parried several strikes before snorting coldly. The red agate that had been floating in the air descended and burrowed into his chest, instantly erupting with blinding black light. He charged at Li Qinghang, blade in hand, engaging her in the sky that echoed with thunderous bursts. Liu Kaiou couldn't find a chance to interfere. She could only distance herself and send black smoke from her brocade fan to harass Li Qinghang from afar. Good. Hellion's mastery of blade arts was average, but his mana was immense and his cultivation method top grade. His technique was solid and he fought Li Qinghang on even ground for a while. After another few dozen exchanges, he seized a moment amid the black smoke and struck viciously. But Li Qinghang found her rhythm as she fought. Her inner thunder surged like a stormy sea. Her spear strikes grew more violent and forceful. Not only did she break through his attack with ease, she reversed her weapon and stabbed diagonally with explosive force. Hellion had to expend nearly double his mana reserves just to block the blow. Something felt off. Her spearwork was only growing more aggressive and lethal. Not only did her lightning suppress his devil magic, it completely shattered his blood chi techniques, rendering them useless. Did she take some kind of pill? He gritted his teeth. Though he hadn't seen her take any pill, devil cultivators knew many tricks. They even stored medicine within their flesh, ready to be absorbed in moments of crisis. It wouldn't be strange, so he held his ground, weathering her assault. Li Qinghang's advantage grew more pronounced as she flung out 2 violent arcs of thunder. Liu Kaiou hurried to block them with black smoke, but in that instant, Li Qinghang's spear reversed mid-flight, bursting with purple lightning as it lunged directly for Liu Kaiou's face. Panic surged through Liu Kaiou as she rapidly retreated, but the stored lightning had been waiting and her defensive smoke was instantly blown away. The searing thunderlight stabbed at her eyes as she desperately retrieved a talisman. Chapter 752, Wounded. Boom, purple lightning erupted. Hellion Chengguang never expected his wife to stay close to the chaos instead of backing away. That she even dared to step forward and interfere shocked him greatly. Heart pounding, he forced himself to cast a spell while braving the 2 bolts of lightning. Translucent Bloodsilver Technique. The blood-colored aura clinging to Li Qinghang's protective lightning exploded with a thunderous blast, shattering the lightning into scattered fragments. Li Qinghang let out a muffled grunt, but she showed no hesitation. Her spear did not pause for a moment as it continued thrusting forward. The Dharma light protecting Liu Kaiou shattered like an eggshell. Only the black glow rising from the talisman was of slightly higher quality. It dented inward under the strain, barely managing to hold together and shield her. But how could this long-prepared strike from Li Qingheng be so easily blocked? 5 bolts of lightning burst from her spear, flashing brilliantly in midair and casting a pale glow over the 3 faces. Then came the crack of thunder. Bang! A bright white spark flashed past, and 5 bolts of lightning struck Liu Kaiou straight in the face. Devil cultivators already feared thunder by nature, so how could she possibly withstand such a blow? Her head burst like a watermelon and was refined by the lightning into black smoke that vanished into the air. Kaiou. Helian Changguang's eyes went bloodshot with grief as the black smoke rose, but he did not rush to save his wife. Instead, red light flared on his dual blades as he viciously stabbed toward the snow-white robe on Li Qingheng's back. Meanwhile, Liu Kaiou, reduced to just a lone torso and legs, raised her hand and pulled out a fleshy orb from her storage pouch. She gripped it in her 2 pale hands and moved it toward the stump of her neck. Devil cultivators differed from immortal cultivators in that they were far more resilient. Though her head had reduced to ash, Liu Kaiou was merely severely injured, but the 2 hands on her torso trembled faintly. She was absolutely terrified. Though she could neither see nor hear, her spiritual sense still worked. It told her that Li Qingheng had remained calm. She showed no intention of retreating. Instead, she gently parted her red lips and released another beam of white light. What? Liu Kaiou's hands froze mid-motion as the explosive white light burst forth. The earth trembled, boulders rolled, and purple thunderrain returned once again. She was completely defenseless now and was only 3 feet from the beam. An instant later, it swallowed her whole. Rumble. A concentrated sweep of lightning flashed by, blinding the cultivators below. The air above the formation fell into eerie silence after the excessive thunderous blasts. Helian Changguang stared in disbelief, momentarily frozen. What? Li Qingheng pulled back her spear and turned coldly toward him. Her spear was pointed diagonally, and her white robes, now tinged with purple, fluttered gently in the wind. Blood trickled slowly from the corner of her mouth. Her back was drenched red. Her black hair drifted in the wind, and strands near her forehead were still stained with blood. Li Qingheng's dark gray eyes quietly bored into Helian Changguang. Behind her, the black smoke dispersed, and a brocade robe fluttered faintly, like a bird with broken wings as it plunged headfirst into the forest. Liu Kaiou had been reduced to ashes. Helian Changguang's eyes filled with disbelief, rage, deep regret, and horror. His once cold and sharp voice turned shrill as he cried out in grief, "You wretched woman!" Though overwhelmed by sorrow, he did not lose his clarity. The strike he had unleashed earlier had not been something one could take lightly. Yet Li Qingheng had taken it head-on just to kill Liu Kaiou. She had almost thrown her own life away in the process. Helian Changguang said nothing, but his trembling lips betrayed the seething hatred in his heart. He instantly refined the pills buried in his flesh. He bellowed like a tiger as his twin blades swept through the air, casting phantom shadows. Black smoke billowed across the ground and surged forward. Li Qingheng lifted her spear and released 2 bolts of lightning shaped like birds. They shot forward, and at nearly the same instant, 5 more lightning bolts leapt from her spear, bursting into brilliant white sparks. Helian Changguang took the spear strike head-on and nearly spat blood. Lightning surged through his internal organs, boiling them. His grip on his blades faltered as he cried out in shock, "You!" Li Qingheng's white robes were now covered in radiant purple lightning, streaks of energy spreading from them. Her garments had transformed into violet robes, tinged with hues of blood red. Purple lightning crawled up her neck, tracing patterns across her cheeks. The blood in her hair condensed into tiny beads, suspended in the air under the thunder's magnetic force. She thrust her spear again. This time it was with a vastly different level of power. Helian Changguang couldn't comprehend it. The purple-clothed thunder cultivator before him was clearly injured, yet it was as if she had unlocked some hidden power. Her strength had increased by at least 50%. The force of her strike left him breathless and his legs numb. He was trembling in fear. The terrifying lightning before him crushed all will to resist. He had no choice but to swallow his rage and take another hit. His abdomen tore open like tofu, leaving a small hole. Lightning started to spread from the wound. Helian Changguang exclaimed in horror, "I can't stall any longer." His left eye burst with a pop, and his body transformed into a streak of blood light. It seemed he had activated some pre-prepared spell art as he rapidly soared upward at breakneck speed. Li Qingheng reacted just as quickly. Fierce lightning erupted beneath her feet as she flew upward on a thunder surge. 1 red and 1 purple trail streaked through the air. Her spear controlled the 5 thunders, launching strike after strike at the bloodlight, each hit raising puffs of black mist. The pursuit spanned 5 kilometers. Helian Changguang's bloodlight shrank with each blow, though the demonic aura around him grew thicker. At last, the thunder cultivator halted. She gave him a cold final glance and vanished into the south as a streak of violet light. Helian Changguang flew several more kilometers before reverting to his original form. He was now just a bare skull connected to a long spine that was dripping blood. His hair, eyebrows, nose, and mouth were gone, leaving only 7 dark holes on his face. He dared not return immediately. He pulled out a corpse he had prepared in advance from his storage. Twisting off the corpse's head, he pulled out the spine and inserted his own. Then he carved out facial features to save time. Once he had finished patching together his new body, he finally let out a sigh of relief. Yet flickers of lightning still danced across his flesh. Both horrified and enraged, Hellion Chengguang fled in panic, thinking to himself, what a terrifying thunder cultivator. Mount Yan Pass. The devil cultivators were very sharp. They noticed instantly when the 2 Foundation Establishment Realm devil cultivators in the sky died and fled. The once loyal horde attacking below instantly dispersed. The cultivators present all sighed in relief, exchanged glances, and were left deeply shaken. That lightning in the sky just now, was it Fairy Li? Though the Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators present didn't have a lot of experience, they had still witnessed Foundation Establishment Realm battles along the way. All were stunned and dazed. Fei Tongyu murmured, "It was a blur of white, lightning and rain falling, blinding us all. King Hung has already reached such a level." Fei Tongyu's shock was understandable. Back then, Li Qinghang had been just a little girl with lower cultivation than his. He could only remain silent. The others were elated and full of praise, but only Li Minggong harbored faint worry. "My lady chased into the demonic cloud all the way. I fear she may have walked into an ambush." She craned her neck to look, and after only a few dozen breaths, a streak of purple light flew toward the front of the formation. When it halted, it took the form of a violet-robed female cultivator. A silver spear held up a brocade robe. Her delicate brows framed apricot eyes tinted violet, and faint traces of thunder still glimmered on her cheeks. Li Qinghang stood there quietly, black hair cascading down. The assembled cultivators hurriedly knelt in respect, utterly convinced of her strength, and shouted in unison, "Greetings, Fairy. Congratulations on your great victory over the devil foe." The lightning on Li Qinghang's body slowly faded, her violet robes returning to white. Spots of blood began to appear, and her eyes returned to their clear black and white brilliance. She spoke with a light, bright voice, "Minggong, come with me inside." Chapter 753, The Immortal Bow of Bianyan I. Li Qinghang rode thunder as she descended into the cave dwelling, forming hand seals to cast a spell that concealed the blood on her back. She still had 60% of her mana. She quickly swallowed a few pills to suppress her wounds. The vast sky-fierce sparrow inside her was still silently circulating, keeping her injuries in check. The demonic energy that had invaded her wounds would normally force ordinary cultivators into emergency seclusion, but her thunder mana dispersed it within 5 minutes. After she downed 2 more pills, a hint of color returned to Li Qinghang's face. Hellion Chengguang was likely a core disciple of a devil cultivator sect. His devil techniques and spell arts were more refined than his partners, and he wielded one Dharma artifact after another. However, her cultivation was above theirs, and as a lightning cultivator, she could suppress them both. She had gauged the pair's strength at a glance and had taken an interest in several of their Dharma artifacts, but devil cultivators' escape arts were notoriously tricky. Though she could easily overpower the two, Hellion Chengguang would flee at the slightest sign of trouble, making it hard to wipe them both out at once. But Li Qinghang was clever and cunning. When the fight started, she never used her full strength and held back just enough to lull the couple into lowering their guard. Then she suddenly exploded in a single instant, obliterating Liu Cairo in one strike, and then turning her attention to Hellion Chengguang. She had almost managed to kill the devil sect descendant as well, but Hellion Chengguang does have some skill. He still managed to injure me. She frowned lightly and pressed her forehead. The mana inside her still surged restlessly. Purple light flickered faintly on her cheeks and shoulders, emitting a soft crackling sound. In the past, Li Yunjiao had always watched over her, so Li Qinghang was rarely injured. This was perhaps the worst she'd been hurt in decades. The vast sky-fierce sparrow's circulation boosted her combat power by 20%, so she had gone all out in the final clash with Hellion Chengguang. She used the vast sky-fierce sparrow's boost to attack with overwhelming force, stunning Hellion Chengguang in just a few moves. If he had not followed his instincts to flee immediately, he would have died there and then. As she pondered this, Li Minggong quickly approached and bowed, saying respectfully, "Congratulations." Li Qinghang merely waved her off and said softly, "Just listen." She took out a purple jade pendant from her robes and handed it to Li Minggong. "Though we've repelled the devil cultivators here, I need to check how things stand elsewhere. This jade pendant holds power for 3 days. If any devil cultivators attack, crush it and I'll come immediately." Li Qinghang still felt uneasy and reminded her, "Only tell the subordinates that I'm recovering in seclusion. Don't let this matter spread." "I'm afraid it may shake morale or lead to an information leak." Minggong understands. Li Minggong nodded in agreement, then hesitantly said, "But Aunt, your wounds haven't been treated yet and you're rushing off to reinforce another location. It's nothing serious." Li Qinghang had already suppressed her injuries with pills. There was only a tightness in her chest now. She smiled and said, "I'm at the late stage of the Foundation establishment. One of them was just mid-stage and the other early stage. What could they possibly do to me? Li Wuxiao's strength is lacking. I don't know if he can hold the line. I must see for myself. If we lose that ground, it may cost him his life as well as Li Wen and Ensiming. Li Minggong was at a loss for words and could only respond respectfully. My cultivation is shallow. I cannot see the full picture. I only hope Aunt will prioritize your own safety. Don't worry. She instructed Li Minggong to stay vigilant, then rode lightning out of the formation. Countless lights burst forth in the far northern sky. Blinding golden brilliance and red flames surged violently. The black clouds in the sky were torn apart for 6 full seconds before slowly converging again. Li Qingheng looked closely in the direction of Mount Baiyan and saw that water and fire fell together, while gold and wood energies surged. It was likely that several Foundation Establishment realm cultivators had fallen simultaneously. Closer to Mount Baiyan, in the western forest, she faintly saw a haze of blood mist. There were crimson droplets of rain drifting down. Mount Baiyan has also been attacked. Family, uncle, and Zijai might be there. Her heart was full of worry. She scanned the scene and, seeing no sign of golden rain in the omen, comforted herself with a few words. Then she flew east for another 15 minutes. Explosions thundered from a checkpoint where a giant serpent darted through the sky. There, 5 figures were locked in battle. 2 of them were Azure Pond sect cultivators, each locked in combat with a devil cultivator. Li Wuxiao had already assumed his original form, a deep black giant serpent. Twin hooks on his tail howled through the air as he struggled to resist the golden light unleashed by the Buddhist cultivator before him. There's even a Buddhist cultivator. Li Qingheng had arrived a bit late. The battle was already at its most intense. Her side was being pushed back and was on the verge of full retreat. Li Wuxiao's body was covered in golden seals, and he let out repeated cries of pain. She brushed her black hair behind her ears and advanced with her spear, unhesitatingly choosing to aid her fellow cultivators. But after flying just a few kilometers forward, she suddenly frowned. Qingheng is here too. A new thought sprang up in Li Qingheng's mind. She concealed her presence and vanished from sight. Li Wuxiao was utterly miserable, since he was being thoroughly beaten down by the Buddhist cultivator. His body was covered in golden palm prints. Black smoke hissed from them as they burned into his scales. He had to counter with twice as much mana for every bit of mana the opponent used. The kindly-looking old man was a master monk of the Great Desire sect. He arrived with gentle words, calling himself Master Monk Yu. He had even complimented Li Wuxiao's physique at first sight. Li Wuxiao hadn't believed a word of it. To him, all master monks except for Qingheng were lunatics. He'd usually avoid fighting them at all costs, but now he had no choice but to confront the monk head-on. Yu Xin fought barehanded, smiling all the while, but his strikes were merciless. A single golden palm had nearly taken half of Li Wuxiao's life. Hatred now burned in the snake's venomous eyes. If I hadn't undergone the 6 dams life-matching unique technique twice, and if Zijin hadn't used that powerful spirit item to temper my body, I'd have already died at this old bastard's hands. But before Li Wuxiao could feel any relief, the kindly old monk looked at him and began chanting with a low, buzzing tone. "You." Li Wuxiao suddenly felt as though his heart had been shattered by a falling stone. His thoughts stuttered, and illusions rose before his eyes. He quickly flicked out his tongue and muttered to himself. Qingheng told me back then that these guys use respected cultivators subduing words. They really do love messing with a demon's mind. I owe him a thanks when I get back. He flicked his tongue again and recited a string of incantations, slowly steadying his mind. Yu Xin's eternally benevolent expression finally shifted, and he exclaimed in alarm, "The Tao of the Northern, revered one. Little serpent, who taught you this?" Li Wuxiao was filled with delight when he saw the old monk lose his composure. He hissed, "Your dad taught your grandpa." Yu Xin's face shifted slightly as he said softly, "Insolent beast, such a foul mouth, let me subdue you." Yu Xin seemed to have lost his temper. Golden light surged from his body, and he thrust his palm forward, forming a golden seal that slammed down on Li Wuxiao. A terrified Wuxiao's scales bristled. Only now did he realize that the monk hadn't even been using his full strength. Damn it. Li Wuxiao wanted to curse him even more, but he hastily dodged backward. His body shrank rapidly, slithering downward, but the golden seal shrank as well, trailing closely like a shadow. Clang. A crisp sound rang out in midair. Li Wuxiao began cursing again, but felt no pain. He quickly turned around and saw a narrow-eyed monk holding a bronze staff, calmly blocking the attack. Chapter 754, The Immortal Bow of Baiyan II. Qingheng. Li Wuxiao froze for a moment, then realized Qingheng must have defeated the devil cultivators at his post and rushed over to assist. He immediately shouted, "Yu Xin, your dad's here." Qingheng glanced at him with a faint smile and offered a courteous greeting. Yu Xin's expression grew solemn as he said reverently, "So it's a fellow of the ancient path. Yu Xin greets the elder. I dare not claim such a title. I am Qingheng." "Greetings to a cultivator of the Great Desire sect," replied Qingheng. Yu Xin, a master monk of the Great Desire sect, gazed intently at him as he said, "A meeting is fated. I only hope to engage the elder in a thorough scripture debate and perfect my King Heng responded warmly, "This little monk is no good at debating scripture. Better to leave it be." King Heng had encountered monks of the Great Desire sect before. They were cultivators who pursued desire as selfhood, mastering the will of their heart. He knew he couldn't out-argue this old monk, so without another word, he raised his staff and brought it crashing down. The two clashed in midair, sending golden light flashing all around. Li Wuxiao, understanding the situation, went to help the two Azure Pond sect cultivators instead. Devil cultivators were selfish and cunning by nature. When they saw the tide turn, the two put on a brief show of resistance, then immediately turned to black smoke and fled. Their survival abilities far outstripped those of immortal cultivators. Despite being surrounded, both managed to escape without leaving so much as a single Dharma artifact behind. When Li Wuxiao turned back, he saw King Heng and Yu Xin casting spell arts and reciting sacred verses. Golden flowers filled the sky, fluttering down with waves of fragrant scent. His serpent eyes narrowed. In the yellow dust below, wolves sat silently amid swirling smoke, ignoring the rotting flesh nearby, ears tilted to listen. The two men and demon beast exchanged a glance and rode the wind to encircle the old monk. But Yu Xin wasn't a fool. He had already anticipated it and called out his farewell. "A fortunate meeting today. If time permits, I shall seek the elder again." His hollow voice echoed in the desert air. A spell art he had long prepared activated, transforming his body into golden petals that fluttered away and reformed several kilometers away. He was making his escape. After a full hour of battle, nearly everyone on Li Wuxiao's side was injured, and they hadn't even managed to seize a single Foundation Establishment Realm storage pouch. How could they just let him go? All of them took to the wind in pursuit. Yu Xin, however, shifted forms repeatedly, flying faster and faster, secretly nodding in satisfaction. Good old King Heng. If I could speak with him at length, my cultivation would surely advance. As for this pack of fools, if they keep chasing me, they'll just be throwing away their lives. He arched his long white brows, savoring his success, but his satisfied expression slowly faded. His spiritual sense suddenly stirred, and he gritted his teeth, shouting, "Which fellow cultivator?" A figure clad in white, crackling with purple lightning, appeared in front of him, blocking his path with a long spear. The female cultivator said coldly, "Master Monk, where do you think you're going?" Yu Xin glanced at her eyes and brows, his heart stirring slightly. He took another look and murmured, "A thunder cultivator." Li Qinghang made no attempt at courtesy. Though she asked a question, her lightning spear had already pierced forward. Yu Xin raised his palm to catch it, utterly dismissive. "The Great Desire sect is not like the Devil sects. I've no real fear of your lightning." But then thunder boomed. Bright white sparks burst from Yu Xin's palm. He cried out in pain and instantly snatched his hand back. When he examined it, he found that his palm had been scorched black. He immediately grew serious, golden light flaring once more as his expression darkened. Behind him, the Azure Pond cultivators and King Heng were already closing in. Damn it. Starlight glittered over Moongaze Lake as Li Xiaowei landed atop Qingdu Peak. The household had emptied out, and Qingdu Peak felt even more deserted. He walked forward a few steps, only finding the elder, Li Xuanxuan, seated within the main hall. The Li family had deployed a great many people. Li Xuanxuan had come out of seclusion to find the house mostly empty. He had rushed out to seek Li Zijun, only to find that the young man had already gone out to patrol the lake. At the moment, he was holding a registry list, frowning as his aged finger traced name after name, counting which branch each belonged to and who their ancestors were. When Li Xiaowei entered the hall, the old man's tense wrinkles finally eased upon seeing the treasured heir. His spiritual sense swept over him and said, "Fourth stage of the Qi cultivation realm already. Good." He pointed to the registry and said, "This, your father decided this. Why wasn't I informed of such a major matter? Why was Yuexiang sent out?" It was Qingdu's direct order. Li Xiaowei's broad shoulders sank heavily into the seat as he responded. Li Xuanxuan simply muttered, "That child Zijun." Li Xiaowei understood. It would only burden Li Xuanxuan with worry to get involved. But the elder continued, "You lot, none of you have pity for your own kin." Li Xiaowei quietly listened to the old man's complaints. Then suddenly Li Xuanxuan remembered something and said, "Since the Eastern Sea is in such chaos, why not call your uncle Chenghui back?" Li Xiaowei nodded but did not reply. After holding his breath for a moment, Li Xuanxuan exhaled and asked, "And what's with that Ning family fellow pulling so many of our people? I heard the Azure Pond sect only asked for 50%, but he's taking whatever he pleases. If I were there, I'd show him some real attitude." Li Xiaowei cupped his hands and answered simply, "Azure Pond sect can't be fully trusted. I've only heard that Uncle Zijun received the radiant Snow Pine Ridge. His cultivation is rising steadily. Ever since then, he doesn't get angry. As long as the interests are clear, it's fine." Li Xuanxuan paused for a moment, sipped his tea, and sighed repeatedly. Suddenly, a broad-faced middle-aged man at the 8th stage of the Qi cultivation realm hurried forward from below, carrying a long spear on his back. This was Siwei, son of Njayan. His younger brother Siming had gone north, while he had stayed at Li Zijun's side. He knelt and saluted hastily. His usually calm face was filled with excitement as he said, "My lord, there's news from Sioux State." Li Shuangxun quickly stood, his old face full of anxiety. He even forgot to put his teacup down and hurriedly asked, "Speak. Wait, where's Zijin?" And Siwei said, "He captured several southbound devil cultivators. He's interrogating them on the lake and sent me ahead to report. Both devil and Buddhist sects are moving south, Tao of great desire, Tao of compassion, Tao of emptiness." The Chuoba and Murong families, major demon tribes, even the Hellion family of Taifu and the other branch of the Li family, all the minor families have joined in. Demonic energy surged, and golden light filled the skies. And Siwei spoke in a deep voice. The Murong family and Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators of the Great Desire sect were ambushed midway by the Golden Feather sect. Azure Pon's Li Xunfeng led his forces out of seclusion, intercepted the reinforcements, and routed the northern cultivators. My lord drew his bow and in just 15 minutes killed Murong Wu of the Murong family, wearer of the black Chuan armor and elder Yu Kaiyan of the Buddhist sect. Murong Wu was obliterated, body and soul, and Yu Kaiyan forced into reincarnation. After slaying the two, my lord coughed up golden blood, and the immortal bowstring snapped. A great desire spirit beast lunged in that moment, but my lord sneered, caught it bare-handed, and tore it in half. Blood rained across the skies, terrifying 21 high-ranking devil and Buddhist cultivators into complete silence. They say the silence lasted a full 6 seconds. Not a soul dared speak until the last drop of blood fell. And Siwei finished in one breath, his voice trembling with both awe and joy. Now the entirety of Sioux State knows of the immortal bow at Mount Bianyan. Chapter 755, First Battle I. Li Shuangxun sat in stunned silence, his hand trembling as it tugged at his white beard. Still half in disbelief, he asked, "Who, Xuanfeng?" It was the Lord himself. And Siwei bowed deeply and replied, reporting to Elder, "The news is absolutely true." "Ah ha ha." Li Shuangxun let out a laugh and returned to his seat, rubbing the jade teacup in his hand, torn between disbelief and joy as he said, "So Xuanfeng has already reached such a level." This old man failed to see the full picture and underestimated him. He took a sip of tea, then nodded and said with a smile, "Good, he destroyed Murong Wu's very soul. Good, he even forced a Buddhist cultivator into reincarnation. My brother is truly a man of the highest caliber. It's only right that he struck such terror into them." The old man set his cup down, thinking silently. He spat golden blood. "I wonder how serious the injury is." Only then did he look again at Li Xiaowei, standing to the side with halberd in hand. The boy's eyes were shining, and he gripped his iron halberd so tightly it seemed he was ready to charge into slaughter at any moment. Sensing Li Shuangxun's gaze, Li Xiaowei lowered his eyes slightly and replied, "My lord's might is unmatched, and there's support from within the border. He'll be fine, without a doubt." Li Shuangxun nodded. Just then, a figure descended at the front of the hall. Clad in flowing white robes, sword at his waist, the man's expression was caught between joy and worry. "Zijin," said Li Shuangxun. Li Zijin bowed respectfully, then spoke. "After the last incident, I didn't dare bring anyone back. I interrogated them on the lake, sent Siwei ahead to report, and stayed behind to clean up the rest." Li Shuangxun nodded silently, a hint of hope in his voice. "Any news? Have you heard anything about King Hung and Zijai?" Li Zijin shook his head, a trace of worry appearing on his face as he replied softly, "The main force there did achieve a great victory, but according to the cultivators who came south, the rest of the front is being dominated by the Buddhist and devil cultivators. Many outposts have already fallen, and devil cultivators are flooding south. Most of the outposts were raided. The Chuoba family broke through near Lake Xi'an. Most Buddhist cultivators didn't dare press forward and retreated, but many devil cultivators took the chance to surge downward. Some followed the great river east, others west." Li Shuangxun thought for a moment, then murmured, "To the east is open wilderness, but go with the current and you reach Profound Peak Gate. To the west lies the Zio family. Only upriver does it lead to our family. Not too dangerous yet." Li Zijin nodded faintly, his tone growing heavier. "That's just the... On the way back, I encountered people from several sects. The south isn't stable either." He found a place to sit nearby and gave Li Xiaowei a slight nod before speaking. "The conflict between Ziyuqi Dao and Crimson Reef Island is intensifying. Changxiao Gate has been invaded by Hengzhu Dao. They are already several hundred kilometers into their territory. It said the Golden Feather sect even sent mediators, but it achieved nothing. And that's just part of it. Wu State is also in turmoil. The Golden Feather sect was attacked, and the minor sects across that region are in utter chaos. 4 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators have fallen in just 3 days. As for the Eastern Sea, it's shrouded in dark clouds. All contact with the islands has been lost." Li Shuangxun nodded quietly and said, "I've been worried about that too. Cheng Hui still doesn't know about Zicheng's death." Mount Yan Pass. King Heng held his bronze staff and suspended Yu Zin in midair, striking him until his golden palm shrank back. Yu Zin's expression changed slightly as he said, "You." But before he could say more, lightning crashed again from behind. The female lightning cultivator's strikes were devastating, blackening his Dharma body in patches and draining his mana. His head throbbed with pain. Just when he managed to deflect the thunder with mana, the hooked serpent took the chance to gloat, laughing amidst dark smoke. It spat out a bead filled with icy snow, whipping up a howling wind. The frigid wind cut through the air. Although it was not enough to harm his body, it clouded his spiritual sense, throwing off his movements like a buzzing, relentless fly. Fortunately, the demonic serpent didn't dare move in to attack and simply stayed back, stirring them. The two Azure Pond sect cultivators also avoided direct combat, occasionally loosing sneak attacks from afar, easing the pressure slightly. If they were coordinated, I'd have lost this body already. Growing more anxious, he finally shouted, "Elder Kingheng, you and I both follow the Buddhist Tao, the true Tao of the Golden Lotus. Why do you side with this purple mansion and Golden Core realm heretic?" Kingheng merely shook his head, tightening his grip, and spoke gently, "That's not quite right. All Taos have their way upward. As long as one cultivates earnestly, one will attain the golden truth. What right is there to call others heretical?" As he shattered Yu Zin's Dharma body with blow after blow, Kingheng's voice remained calm. "But your 7 Taos, they've strayed from the revered one's original intent. Each believes only their way is true, and all others are mere heresies. That is a delusion born of self-pride, a barrier of the heart." He dodged the topic, making Yu Zin increasingly anxious. Yu Zin desperately said, "Fellow cultivators, you can't kill me anyway. Why damage the Dharma body I painstakingly cultivated? I'll hand over everything on me. How about you show mercy and let this body return?" His expression darkened as he added coldly, "If you refuse, I'll destroy this body myself, since I'll lose it either way, but I'll make sure you suffer injuries as well." The Li family cultivators remained unmoved. But the two Azure Pond Sect Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators exchanged glances and paused their spells. One of them said, "Fellow Taoist Kingheng." Li Kingheng frowned slightly, feigning indifference and ignoring them for a while, but one of them flew closer and spoke again, forcing her to acknowledge him. She looked up to see the Azure Pond Sect cultivator wearing a bitter expression. "Perhaps we should just agree to his terms." The two didn't want to risk injury, nor did they wish to offend a slippery master monk too deeply. Yet leaving empty-handed would be too bitter, so they said awkwardly, "Fellow Taoist Kingheng, we're not from esteemed families like yours. We were conscripted here. We're just hoping to survive and earn something while at it. We might as well let him go." These two were cultivators who had surrendered at sea and joined Azure Pond Sect as guest elders, so their perspectives were different. Li Kingheng finally lowered her spear and sighed, "Then you may go and speak with him, negotiate the terms." Li Kingheng had to consider their stance. After all, several younger cultivators from her family were currently serving under these two and had been well treated. If these two held a grudge, casualties would be unavoidable in future battles. The two were delighted and stepped forward to speak with Yu Zin. He was overjoyed to keep his body, since it meant preserving 50 or 60 years of cultivation. The three ended up chatting like old friends. After several dozen breaths, Yu Zin pulled out a trove of spirit items from his sleeves, emptying both cuffs completely. He even took off his Dharma robe. Then when the two weren't looking, he slipped away on the wind. Chapter 756, First Battle II. The two returned laden with treasures and allowed him to leave. They picked through the items and said with a grin, "Fellow Taoist Kingheng." Li Kingheng glanced at them. It was indeed a valuable collection, but nothing truly enticing. She feared there might be some hidden trick behind accepting them, so she responded gently, "You two keep them, it's fine." But the two looked awkward, as if the items were burning in their hands. Li Kingheng smiled faintly and said softly, "There are a few younger members of my family under your command. I hope you'll continue looking after them." Of course, of course." The two immediately understood, laughed heartily, and accepted the gift with peace of mind before flying off. Only then did Kingheng reveal a look of guilt. "Kingheng, I failed to properly guide the juniors." Li Kingheng's heart sank as she asked, "Who was it? What happened?" Kingheng shook his head, voice filled with remorse. "The terrain at my post was lower and got hit much earlier. Devil cultivators appeared as early as this morning. My comrades and I went out to meet them in battle. We fought for 2 hours and just barely held on. The formation beneath us was broken early on. Everyone was mixed together. It was chaos. Eventually reinforcements arrived from both flanks and drove the devil cultivators back. The city's defenses were reestablished. But when we counted the casualties, everyone was wounded, and even a Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator had fallen." He continued softly, 3 embryonic breathing realm cultivators from our family died. I've kept their names. A late-stage Qi cultivation cultivator, Li Chengchu, also fell. I gathered his remains in haste before rushing here to help." Li Kingheng pursed her lips and asked, "Was his body intact?" "Only the head remained. His younger brother cried until he fainted," replied Kingheng. Li Kingheng said simply, "I'll go with you to see." The Li brothers were among the first to begin training at Mount Qingdu. Chengchu had progressed even faster than his brother. Li Kingheng hadn't seen much of him herself, but Li Zijin had interacted with him often. She flew back with King Heng, and she soon encountered Zhao Tingui on the city wall, who was hurrying along with several Ning family cultivators toward the eastern flank. The man no longer had his former composure. He was dusty and blood-stained. His sword was still dripping with blood, and his face was heavy with tension. When he ran into Li Qingheng, even someone as smooth-tongued as he could only manage a strained smile, "Fellow Taoist Qingheng, my greetings. It's thanks to your family's Wanglin blossom that my junior brother survived." Li Qingheng knew full well he likely had plenty of life-saving tools beyond just the Wanglin blossom, but he was giving her family credit. She responded kindly, "A late-stage qi cultivation cultivator from my family fell. I'm going to recover the remains." Her bluntness left Zhao Tingui speechless. He wiped his sword with a sigh and said, "My condolences, fellow Taoist." Li Qingheng quickly asked, "How is the situation at the pass?" "Not promising." Zhao Tingui's face darkened as he spoke. There was a deep anger in his voice. The Foundation Establishment Realm guest cultivators from the Eastern Sea were fine. But can you believe a few who grew up under Azurpan sect actually trusted what the devil cultivators said? When the fight wasn't going in their favor, they really handed over a few of our people to them, thinking it would settle things. Ridiculous. It shattered morale among the qi cultivation cultivators, and panic and terror spread. Some almost fled on their own. One of them even got ambushed right as the formation opened and barely survived. Zhao Tingui's face grew even uglier as he said coldly, "And there were those who, after repelling the devil cultivators, let greed get the better of them and chased the enemy for over 50 kilometers. By the time they hesitated and turned back, the formation had already been breached. What kind of nonsense is that?" Li Qingheng simply offered calm reassurance. Jiangnan cultivators were raised inland, where the sects all value reason. They're easy to confuse or mislead in a crisis. It's only natural that they fell for it. They can't compare to the devil cultivators of the Eastern Sea or the North, but given time they'll adapt. Zhao Tingui nodded, a hint of envy flashing in his eyes. He sighed, "Qingheng, have you heard? Your family's elder has already struck fear into the hearts of the devil cultivators." Mount Bianyan, white mist coiled thick in the sky. The atmosphere was humid and sticky, and mist condensed on silver armor, turning into sparkling, glinting droplets. The armor had a silver-gray sheen, its intricate patterns depicting several dragon beasts bearing fangs and claws, as if ready to come alive and unleash cold, piercing light. The heavy armor hung in Li Xuanfeng's hand as he stood silently among the clouds. Sticky blood trickled down the silver edges of the armor. Moments ago, it had coalesced into a serpent as it attempted to reform. But when it was struck by arrow intent, it scattered into the wind. The devil and Buddhist cultivators stood frozen amidst the black clouds, staring blankly at him. Murong Wu had been truly powerful. Of all the Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators Li Xuanfeng had slain, he ranked near the top. In truth, he was far stronger than Sidu Chen of Golden Tang Gate. He was a tough opponent indeed. When the young devil cultivator had first descended in his armor, his demonic aura had surged to the heavens. The silver armor gleamed brilliantly, and his long saber burned with roaring mana flames. He had even sneered and said, "Azurpan sect wasted all its treasured panaceas on Kai Wei, and now they send some old relic like you to fight. This boy is far too arrogant," thought Li Xuanfeng. He remained expressionless, gave him no chance to act, and shot him down outright. When an unknown Buddhist elder tried to intervene, he too was felled with 5 arrows piercing his skull. Murong Wu had raged furiously, but he'd already fallen into Li Xuanfeng's rhythm of the hunt. He was no longer free to come and go. In the end, he had to admit his defeat, lost his halberd, and abandoned his body. Everyone had expected him to reincarnate from the devil ranks, but only black fluid fell from the sky. They were horrified to realize Murong Wu was truly dead. "The fool was careless and got caught in my arrow intent. Both soul and body were turned to ash. How could there be any life left? He had slain one Buddhist, one devil, and even torn a spirit beast in half, yet hadn't uttered a single boast. He stood there with his snapped golden bowstring, silently and coldly staring at them. Li Xuanfeng's gaze swept across the battlefield, leaving all cultivators paralyzed in uncertainty. The aerial duels became distracted, as none dared fall into his hands. The battle shifted into a tense and bizarre stalemate. The dozen or so fights in the sky all slowed down. Though Li Xuanfeng had only brought 17 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators who were each slightly weaker than their devil and Buddhist counterparts, they were now fighting on equal footing. The few devil cultivators who had finished their fights now hid in the clouds, unsure whether to retreat or not. They're likely going to pull back. Li Xuanfeng's eyes narrowed, but he saw everything clearly. Though his bowstring was broken and his injuries were heavy, he stood firm in the clouds that Buddhist elder had held back from the start. He took 5 arrows and still reincarnated with ease. It was a setup. He wanted Murong Wu dead. Behind him, Ning Heiyuan had finished his battle. It was his first time seeing his brother-in-law fight, and he couldn't hide his shock. Ning Heiyuan quickly moved to Li Xuanfeng's side and whispered, "Brother-in-law, be careful of a coordinated strike." The tiger wolf-like spirit beast's blood still steamed on his armor, its bones already divided among the troops. Li Xuanfeng smiled sardonically. Now that suspicion runs deep among them, how could they unite to strike me? Give it 15 minutes, they'll scatter on their own. Chapter 757, The Merciful One Newsy Eye. Ning Heiyuan responded and stood to the side. Golden light dimmed in the distance as cold black rain fell from the sky. The devil cultivators remained silent, slowly retreating into the clouds. The faint golden light at the horizon faded. Ning Heiyuan calculated for a moment. Things on the golden feather sect's side were likely over. He felt at ease and looked ahead again. The black mist continued to recede, and the aerial battles all ended with the devil cultivators retreating in defeat. The demonic flames and golden lights all withdrew, and everyone put away their dharma lights, visibly relieved. Li Xuanfeng stowed away his golden bow and hovered in midair until the devilish clouds finally dispersed completely. Return to Mount Banyan. Li Xuanfeng ordered, and everyone quickly responded, flying back together on the wind, exchanging glances filled with both awe and fear. Unlike the Foundation establishment realm cultivators conscripted from below, those stationed at the passes guarded by Li Qinghang were cultivators summoned from esteemed families of the Eastern Sea and the southern border. They were all Taoists or even peak masters of the Azure Pond sect. At this moment, they all wore grave expressions. We'd heard before that Taoist master Yuan Su had a golden bow-wielding Li Xuanfeng under his command. Even Ning Heiyuan couldn't order him around, and he only carried out deadly tasks. At the time, we thought it just meant he was valued by the Taoist master because he was likely strong. But seeing him now, he's truly a star of slaughter. The Taoists had originally only acted out of courtesy to the Ning family, following orders to defend the pass, though some of them had held doubts. Now, none of them spoke as they flew out beyond the pass. Once they flew out, Li Xuanfeng turned around, still holding the coldly gleaming armor in his hand, and said in a low voice, "Thank you for coming out of the mountain with me. Please return to your respective posts to guard the passes." Everyone answered in unison. Some left in pairs and others alone as they headed to different parts of the mountains. Li Xuanfeng led the Ning family members back and landed at the great formation within the mountain. He finally descended as Fei Yi hurriedly came up to him. Li Xuanfeng removed his armor, revealing bloodied cracks in his palm. He had fought too fiercely, and even his post-talisman-enhanced body was struggling to hold up. Li Xuanfeng stared at his palm with gray eyes, using his mana to seal the wound and force the blood back into his body. He asked softly, "How is the pass holding?" Fei Yi, naturally understanding what he meant, answered in the same soft tone. The devil cultivators attacked from the south but were intercepted. The east suffered little damage. Baixiang Valley remains calm, while Yan Pass did face an assault. But Qinghang killed one of them. She's now outside the pass. Not bad. A rare smile appeared on Li Xuanfeng's face as he took out the longbow. Ning Heiyuan gently received it, along with Li Xuanfeng's armor, and softly said, "I'll have someone repair this for you, brother-in-law." He retreated with the Ning family people, and only then did Li Xuanfeng speak softly, "Have Qinghang wait in the mountains, I'll go see her shortly." He dismissed Fei Yi as well. His organs still burned like fire, so he took out a few pills and swallowed them, meditating briefly. A cool sensation slowly eased into his body, and after coughing up a few mouthfuls of black blood, he felt much more at ease. Li Xuanfeng sat quietly to recover, thinking, killing a direct descendant of the Murong family has significantly shifted the balance. This matter won't die down so easily. There will definitely be more trouble ahead. I'll have to be ready. Meanwhile, Fei Yi, filled with excitement now that he had Li Xuanfeng's order, boldly sought out the Ning family people and calmly said, "Please ask Taoist Qinghang to await orders at General Peak." Although Fei Yi was senior to Li Qinghang in age, he had no background and low cultivation. He held no right to speak of seniority here. Were it not for carrying a message, he would normally address any Foundation establishment realm cultivator as senior, let alone someone like Li Qinghang, a rising star in the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm. The Ning family members ahead looked down on him, but still respected Li Xuanfeng's name and nodded in assent. The old man hurried to the peak, thinking to himself, Li Qinghang is wise and gentle. She's the kindest among the Li family. Now that she's here in the mountains, she surely knew I was with the general. There's a good chance she brought Tang Yu with her. After a short wait, a slightly pale Li Qinghang entered. She wore an ordinary white robe and looked somewhat weary. As Fei Yi expected, behind her stood Fei Tangyu, who had come with her from Moongaze Lake. His eldest son no longer bore the gentle elegance and charm he had when he left home. Now he looked haggard and worn, like a completely different person. Fei Tangyu also seemed injured. His neck was bruised and pale, his eyes deeply sunken and his cheeks gaunt. The fan he always carried was gone, replaced by a short spear clenched tightly in his white-knuckled hands. If the old man hadn't recognized him with spiritual sense, he wouldn't have known who he was. He stood there in a daze and simply asked, "Tangyu." Fei Tongyu jerked his head up like he'd been shocked, looked at him twice, and asked, "And you are?" Li Qingheng had expected this scene. She simply said, "You two talk," and stepped out of the hall. The evening breeze blew in with a cold and biting mist, the muffled sound of father and son sobbing in each other's arms from within the hall. Li Qingheng stood in the wind, arms folded, allowing her white robe to flutter. Her black hair flowed gently. After several breaths of time, a man approached with a seal hanging at his waist. He looked at her with some surprise and smiled. "I've always seen you in armor. This is the first time I've seen you in a skirted robe." It was none other than Ning Heiyuan, who was also in the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm. Li Qingheng simply smiled and shook her head. "I don't place much importance on things like that." Li Qingheng had always been this way. She had never taken youth-preserving pills nor used any treasured panaceas. Ning Heiyuan nodded in agreement, but then golden lights began to appear in the sky, trailing fiery tails as they hovered and flickered unpredictably. "The people from the Golden Feather sect are here." Ning Heiyuan furrowed his brow. He saw a streak of golden light wait briefly at the edge of the formation. The light entered the formation, circled twice and landed before them, transforming into a golden-robed woman. She lowered her gaze, half her face veiled by golden gauze. Her expression was composed as she spoke gently. "Fellow Taoist Heiyuan, I hope I may see Li Xuanfeng, Fairy Duanyan." Ning Heiyuan recognized her at once. She was a junior who served by the side of a Purple Mansion Realm cultivator from the Golden Feather sect. He immediately nodded, not daring to delay, and went into the cave dwelling. It didn't take long for him to bring Li Xuanfeng out. Li Xuanfeng had been meditating for long enough to somewhat recover. When he heard that someone from the Golden Feather sect was asking for him, he instantly thought, so they've come just as expected. He calmly donned his armor and stepped outside. His gaze was steady and his presence commanding without anger. Once he was in front of the golden-robed woman, he gave a slight nod and cupped his fists. "Greetings, fairy." Zhang Duanyan cultivated the immortal foundation technique Golden Aperture Heart, which made her extremely perceptive. The moment she saw him, she felt a sudden tightness in her chest, as she felt the sheer ferocity radiating from him, and thought, this senior must have slain more Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators than one could possibly count. Chapter 758, The Merciful One Nuzi II. Zhang Duanyan extended a portion of the golden light beneath her feet and said politely, "Senior has rendered a great service. My sect's Taoist master wishes to meet with you. Please come with me." Li Xuanfeng knew there was no room to refuse. He simply nodded, stepped onto the light, and rose into the air with her. Zhang Duanyan added politely, "Senior, my grandfather is Zhang Yun, who was once an old acquaintance of a senior from your esteemed family." She continued to converse diplomatically to avoid an awkward silence as they ascended into the clouds. At last, Li Xuanfeng asked in a deep voice, "May I ask which Taoist master has summoned me?" Li Xuanfeng had encountered more Taoist masters than most, likely even more than members of the Kai family. When he posed the question, Zhang Duanyan simply smiled and said, "Look up, and the Taoist master is right before you." Sure enough, radiant golden light was emerging from the clouds. A rosy cloud floated in the air, and upon it sat a woman in yellow robes and a gauzy veil. Her white hand held two intertwined golden rings. "Greetings, Taoist Master Qiushui." Li Xuanfeng recognized her immediately. She was none other than Taoist Master Qiushui of the Golden Feather sect, who had intervened during the fall of Yuansu. It was said that she had reached the late stage of the Purple Mansion realm. She sat lightly upon the clouds and slowly removed her veil. Zhang Qiushui's face looked no older than 16 or 17 and had a rounded chin with large, bright, gentle eyes. She spoke softly. "When I heard the news, I thought, of course it was you. There are only 2 or 3 in all of Azure Ponsec's domain who are this fierce." Though both were old acquaintances of Yuansu, Taoist Master Qiushui was clearly much easier to speak with than Taoist Master Zaipai, and appeared more gentle as well. Li Xuanfeng responded in a low voice, and she said with a smile, "After all, you're a direct descendant of Wei's Li. Whether it's Li Qijing or Li Tongya, along with your immortal bow and bearing, everything clearly shows. There's no doubt you're a direct descendant." Li Xuanfeng could not respond, but Zhang Qiushui didn't give him a chance to. Suddenly, she turned to the side, where a stern-looking mature-faced cultivator in green robes revealed himself. She spoke simply, "Taoist Yuanziu has arrived." Taoist Yuanziu merely nodded and waited silently. Zhang Qiushui turned back to Li Xuanfeng. "You needn't fear, it's just some entanglement with Buddhist cultivators. Before Wei there was Zhou. Then Qi Liang and the Chuoba family. All are still renowned. Zhao has yet to suppress any of them." She even laughed aloud. A stern Yuanziu interjected. "The emperor from the Fuqi family couldn't even protect his own soul, how could he harm anyone else?" Zhang Qiushui reined in her smile and finally said, "Murong Wu's storage pouch, has it been touched? Give it to me." Li Xuanfeng had kept it with him the whole time. He presented it with both hands. Zhang Qiushui examined the pouch, saw it had not been tampered with, and nodded in approval. "Su's state isn't worth much. You made a few of the merciful ones suffer slight losses. That gives me leverage, so of course I must reward you." She looked to Taoist Yuan Ziu. After a brief moment, he finally took out a jade vial from his sleeve and said solemnly, "A reward is fitting. This Zheng metal triple chi pill was a gift from Taoist Master Qiushui to me. Take it and use it." A pill. Li Xuanfeng bowed and gave thanks, receiving it gently. When the two Taoist masters fell silent, the golden-robed Zhang Duanyan quickly caught on and softly said, "Allow me to escort you down, senior." Li Xuanfeng took his leave with a salute and descended on the clouds alongside the composed young woman. As they traversed the skies, he pondered deeply, uneasy at how accommodating the two Taoist masters had been. He thought, is this a blessing or a curse? What exactly does this pill do? Is it meant to help me ascend, making me a stronger piece in their great void struggle? Or is it something else entirely, like an attempt to bind my life with this pill? As he brooded, Zhang Duanyan suddenly smiled beside him. "Senior, my grandfather holds great admiration for Senior Tangya. He's mentioned him to me often. Now he's in seclusion attempting a breakthrough to the Purple Mansion realm. When he emerges, he intends to visit your family." Li Xuanfeng paused, thoughtful. Zhang Duanyan silently escorted him to the peak, then rode a beam of golden light upward, vanishing swiftly into the wind-blown horizon. Within the clouds, Li Xuanfeng had long departed, but Zhang Qiushui stood silently. She was clearly colder toward Taoist Yuan Ziu than Li Xuanfeng. Though she still maintained a habit of smiling and speaking politely, the warmth was replaced by caution. Before either of them could act, the great void suddenly tore open, and a massive golden figure burst forth. The golden body had 4 arms and 4 legs, with 2 faces on its neck. One of the faces was grinning fiercely while the other was weeping mournfully. Both were adorned with beautiful, intricate markings. The 4 arms held a variety of weapons: a club, a staff, a saber, and a sword, each glowing with radiant light. The Buddhist cultivator was followed by a golden-bodied arhat. He was broad and muscular, clad in gleaming golden armor. His face was dignified, and 4 keen eyes glowed beneath his eyebrows. He held a long staff in both hands. Zhang Qiushui's expression immediately turned cold. She said softly, "So it's you, the Merciful One Nuzi, coming all the way out from the great void to find us. What matter could be so urgent?" The Merciful One's 4 eyes moved independently. Both mouths opened at once, one weeping, the other groaning. The voices overlapped in a blend of sorrow and agony. "I thought surely the Taoist master would want to meet one destined to be connected with me, so I came. But alas, the timing was off. It seems I arrived just too late." Now, not only did Zhang Qiushui wear a frosty expression, but even Yuan Ziu's stern face openly displayed disgust. He said coldly, "What now? The Merciful One already has a Vajra of innate divine strength and still wants a mighty arhat. You've cultivated quite the greedy heart." The Merciful One seemed entirely unaffected by the insult. The overlapping voices continued, now with a hint of mirth. "This is all due to fate. You two are attached to form. This person is simply destined to follow my Tao." Yuan Ziu seemed to loathe the Merciful One beyond measure. His thick eyebrows bristled as he snapped, "Heretical scum, shameless beyond belief. When Yuan Su was alive, you never dared peek this way. Now that he's fallen, you think you can come here with your greedy thoughts." The Merciful One closed all 4 eyes and replied, "Anger harms the soul, Taoist master, take care. There was no destiny before, but now destiny has arrived. How can the two be compared?" He smiled faintly at the visible rage in both Taoist masters. Then, without another word, he tore open the great void and slipped inside. Yuan Ziu's face darkened as he shouted, "Nuzi, if you dare to tempt anyone from my sect, I'll let you taste the power of the profound yellow Tao talisman. I'll seal your Dharma body and send you crawling off to reincarnate." Zhang Qiushui said nothing. She kept her eyes fixed coldly on the great void. Only after the Merciful One disappeared did she softly remark, "I thought Tianxiao had beaten some sense into him. But it hasn't been long, and he stirs again. Such is the nature of Buddhist cultivators." The pitch-black storage pouch hovered gently at her side. Taoist Yuan Ziu nodded, then raised his hand and lightly pushed forward. Instantly, everything before them dimmed. The world lost all color and descended into boundless darkness. They had entered the great void. Waves of demonic energy entwined with golden light surged before them, churning and twisting in the great void. A 3-headed, 6-armed form flickered in and out of sight within the haze. Runes and lotus-shaped Dharma artifacts floated above countless eyes staring from the depths. On the other side, bright and pure auras shimmered, with divine radiance weaving through the air. Several figures stood quietly in opposition to the Merciful One and the demonic entity. As the 2 Taoist masters stepped into the void, rainbow-hued light began to shimmer around them as well. Chapter 759, Reforging Dharma Artifacts. Li Xuanfeng landed on the peak and saw everyone looking up at him. He noticed many unfamiliar faces among them. Ning Heiyuan stood at the front, hands clasped behind his back, his expression relaxed and eyebrows slightly lifted, concealing a trace of pride. Li Xuanfeng nodded slightly, and Ning Heiyuan immediately stepped forward and said softly, "Congratulations, brother-in-law." He stepped aside, revealing the man behind him. It was Kai Jian, younger brother of sect master Kai Jian. The man had a somewhat sinister appearance and narrow eyes, which he opened bigger only upon seeing Li Xuanfeng. He smiled and said, "Taoist, your archery is truly formidable. To kill Murong Wu in just a quarter of an hour, our eyes have been thoroughly opened." Kai Jian, nearly the highest-ranking person present, gestured for him to enter for a more private discussion. His tone remained courteous as he asked, "Which Taoist masters did you meet?" "Taoist masters Qiushui and Yuan Ziu." Li Xuanfeng answered as he stepped forward. He stood a head taller than Kai Jian, who looked up and met his eyes. Li Xuanfeng continued in a deep voice, "The Taoist masters gifted me a pill, offered much encouragement, and said little else." Kai Jian seemed to be thinking deeply. He lowered his head and after a moment asked, "And what sort of immortal pill was it?" "A Zheng metal triple qi pill." Li Xuanfeng spoke the name as he searched Kai Jian's face. The man's eyes were blank and he seemed to ponder it repeatedly, as though he had never heard the name before. "Which Taoist master gave it to you?" asked Kai Jian. "Taoist master Yuan Ziu." Li Xuanfeng replied, and seeing that Kai Jian still looked utterly puzzled, thought to himself, "Kai Jian probably has no idea what it is." He answered a few more of Kai Jian's questions perfunctorily. Once enough courtesy had been shown, he finally said, "I've just come from a fierce battle and am wounded. Forgive me for not staying longer. Once I finish healing and stabilize my qi, I'll take the pill." Kai Jian could only nod and retreat. Ning Heiyuan bustled in shortly after. Li Xuanfeng had only managed to suppress his injuries after half an hour of treatment, but the exertions along the way had caused his organs to ache again, and his face was slightly pale. He simply took out Murong Wu's helmet and armor and tossed them to the ground. Instantly, Dharma light shimmered across the jade tiles. He said softly, "Have this armor reforged. Find a few artifact smiths to present a couple of designs for recasting. I'll choose one or two." Ning Heiyuan nodded lightly. Li Xuanfeng quickly made his way down and saw Li Qingheng waiting in the hall. When she saw him approach, she looked at him with concern. "Second uncle, how are your injuries?" Li Xuanfeng merely exhaled and waved it off. Seeing his expression, Li Qingheng quickly explained how she had injured Helian Chengguang and took two items out from her storage pouch. One was a dark green fan with intricate patterns and densely inscribed spells, arranged in 5 distinct totem-like motifs. Its style was refined, but carried a hint of opulence. The other item was a white brocade robe with long turquoise feathers at the shoulders. It had previously been worn by a devil cultivator and was shrouded in demonic energy, concealing its features. Now that it was revealed, it looked ethereal. However, it was slightly faded since it had been scorched by lightning. Li Xuanfeng listened carefully, then activated the array in the hall and said, "Qingheng, the Helian family is of royal blood in the Taifo state, north of Zhao. From your description, Helian Chengguang holds some status. To fight 2 and kill 1 on your own is not an easy feat." His old eyes beneath his brows were still sharp. He stood with arms crossed. Even in his injured state, his voice was crisp and firm. "But offending that man isn't a good thing. I'll make a note of it. Stay within the pass for now and cultivate. When I make a circuit eastward, I'll find him and shoot him before he has time to hold a grudge." Li Qingheng was taken aback. Though she wasn't afraid of the man, she had family in the pass and couldn't remain constantly on guard. There was some risk. Still, unwilling to trouble Li Xuanfeng too much, she replied, "Thank you, second uncle, but your own matters are more important." Li Xuanfeng only shook his head and said with a slightly hoarse voice, "Even if you weren't the strongest in the family, you would be going regardless. Killing a single devil cultivator isn't an issue." He didn't say more. After a closer look, he pointed at the 2 Dharma artifacts and said, "The Helian family has deep foundations. These 2 Dharma artifacts are of decent quality. I know you're uneasy wielding them. Go find Ning Heiyuan and have him assign someone to escort you to the central region to have them reforged." Li Xuanfeng paused, then gave special instructions. "Don't reforge them on Mount Baiyan. There are too many eyes and too many complications. I'll have Murong Wu's armor remade and delivered home to the younger generation." Li Qingheng understood that by younger generation, he meant Li Xiaowei. She nodded and kept it in mind. Li Xuanfeng already looked tired as he waved his hand and started to make his way out. Li Qingheng accompanied him out of the hall, thinking to herself, second uncle's authority grows heavier by the day. She went to find Ning Heiyuan, who was now quite enthusiastic. He brought several artifact smiths under his command and specifically introduced one, a burly old man in red robes. Ning Heiyuan said with a smile, "This is Taoist Chu. He once practiced at the Moongaze Lake Market. He's an old acquaintance of my brother-in-law." Li Qingheng nodded. She understood what Li Xuanfeng meant about the mountain being crowded with watching eyes. She had already grown restless, so she didn't exchange many words with Taoist Chu before hurriedly taking her leave with him. She brought along Fei Tongyu, who still looked weary and dispirited. The 3 of them flew off together. As they flew, Li Qingheng quickly offered an apology and asked, "The matter is urgent, so I dared not linger. May I ask for your name, fellow Taoist?" "Chu Minglian." The old man laughed heartily, clasped his hands behind his back, puffed out his chest, and replied with great gravitas, "Back in my youth, I refined artifacts at the Moongaze Lake Market. The Golden Age longbow that Xuanfeng wields was crafted by none other than myself. Even sword immortals came to my shop to stock up before heading home." This was clearly Chu Minglian's favorite boast, when he shared with everyone he met. After a round of hearty laughter, Li Qinghang's eyes suddenly lit up with anticipation as she asked, "Then, senior, have you ever seen my father, Li Xuanling?" "Li Xuanling, I've heard of Li Xuanxuan, but never Li Xuanling," he replied. Chu Minglian looked slightly embarrassed. Li Qinghang quickly added, "He is the son of the celestial moon sword." Oh, Chu Minglian's demeanor instantly turned solemn and he nodded. "So you are the granddaughter of Li Tangya." He recalled fondly, of the three who came back then, he alone looked like a mere escort. I vaguely remember his broad shoulders. Who would have thought he was such a remarkable figure? The two continued smiling as they chatted and soon returned to the inner pass. They saw Qinghang pacing around from a distance, scanning the area, but there was no sign of Li Wushou. Li Qinghang casually asked and learned that there was a Foundation Establishment Realm female cultivator within the Central Valley whose mount was a white hooked serpent. Li Wushou hadn't seen another of its kind in decades and couldn't restrain his excitement, so he went to pay a visit. The news surprised Li Qinghang a little. She chuckled softly, then led Chu Minglian and Qinghang forward before bringing out the two Dharma artifacts. Chapter 760, Reforging Dharma Artifacts II. Chu Minglian examined them carefully, but Qinghang was the first to speak, his voice thoughtful. "This fan looks like something from the Hellion family. As for the robe, hard to say, but it carries an ancient aura." Chu Minglian paused, slightly surprised by the monk's sharp insight. He then showed his own depth of knowledge and said softly, "I've never been to the north, so I can't speak much on the fan. But the robe, there's definitely something to it." He lifted the snowy white robe, examined the turquoise feathers on its shoulders, and carefully studied the patterns embroidered on it before speaking in a low voice. "There is a 90% chance this is from the Wanglin sect of Ning State." Wanglin sect. Li Qinghang had heard of that immortal sect before. Her family's Wanglin blossom technique also originated from them. But a sudden doubt rose in her heart. He claims to be a rogue cultivator, yet his knowledge is so precise. It seems his inheritance must be a long-standing one. Chu Minglian examined the robe carefully, clicking his tongue in admiration before continuing. "The Wanglin sect is composed mostly of women. This Dharma robe reflects that delicate feminine touch. They've long followed the ancient system of separating sect halls by region. The 36 feather patches arranged in 2 rings likely represent the various subtemples under their governance." Li Qinghang listened intently and nodded. "Senior, your insight is impressive. May I ask, what is the strength of this sect?" "They call themselves an upper sect, so of course they have Golden Core Realm cultivators." Chu Minglian sighed as though suddenly remembering something, and added, "My Chu family originally came from Jiangbei, so naturally I know of them." Chu, the Chu family from which prefecture? Only now did Li Qinghang realize that Chu Minglian had a family background too. She had thought him to be from a minor lineage, which would have explained his lack of reputation. But since he had reached the Foundation Establishment Realm, he ought to have belonged to a proper cultivation family. Chu Minglian's aged eyes narrowed slightly as he adjusted his red robes. A hint of melancholy touched his voice as he answered, "It was once a small family, but now there's no Chu family left to speak of." His expression dimmed further as he added, "My grandnephew. His name was Chu Yi the Li Fire Spear." Chu Yi. The name had faded into history for decades, yet it was still whispered among cultivators. Those who had lived through it remembered with unease. He was a rogue cultivator who caused chaos, forced open the long-sealed Eastern Fire Grotto heaven of the Dongli sect, and single-handedly stirred a storm that shook the entire Yue state. The Li family had benefited greatly from that event. The jade vial on Li Qinghang's waist was most likely an item from the Eastern Fire Grotto heaven and of ancient provenance. He had posed as a rogue cultivator back then, but offended the Han family, who uncovered the truth in secret. He was still in seclusion when calamity struck our home. Chu Minglian seemed unwilling to dwell further on it, but clarity dawned in Li Qinghang's heart, so it was this Chu. The Eastern Fire Grotto heaven incident stirred such chaos. Most likely, he recovered his memories and went to Mount Luoxia, never to return. No wonder Chu Minglian feels so disheartened. Though she understood, Li Qinghang didn't wish to press further. She sighed and remained silent. Chu Minglian quickly regained his cheer and said, "This brocade fan isn't much. One glance is enough to reveal that it's a crude collaboration between a northern Buddhist cultivator and a devil cultivator. I can reforge it with a few materials. Give me a few months and it'll be usable. As for this robe," Chu Minglian examined it again with great care, then spoke seriously, "I see many poorly crafted additions." This robe was likely lost from an immortal sect, then passed through the hands of several devil cultivators who added and patched it over time, either due to damage or blind tampering, until it is what it is now. I'll just remove those faulty patches and repair it according to the original markings. It'll take half a year or so, and once done, it'll be much better than its current state. I'll need some Foundation Establishment Realm spirit items though, depending on what can be gathered. Chu Minglian accepted the task with great confidence. Li Qingheng recalled the many spirit items Li Zijian had given her and laid them out one by one on the table. Chu Minglian examined the spirit items thoroughly and confidently said, "If you trust me, leave it to me. I'll trade some of these, get more materials from the mountains, and if it's still not enough, I'll ask you for more later." Li Qingheng nodded readily and politely saw him off. Qingheng followed beside her, a hint of worry in his expression as he quietly asked, "Taoist Qingheng, did you kill someone from the Hellion family?" "I didn't quite kill him, but it was close. We met on the battlefield and there was no way out." Li Qingheng answered casually. Qingheng followed behind, feeling a quiet unease as he thought to himself, could fate have intertwined their paths? The Hellion family's ancestors were once a border tribe of Wei State and received favors long ago. As the thought lingered, he chuckled inwardly. It's been so many years. I'm overthinking it, always reading too deeply into fate and karma. Now I've gone and entangled myself in it too. Mount Qingdu. Li Zijian received the remains of those who had returned from the north. He collected the bones of Li Chengchu, then examined the other corpses one by one. 2 were from lesser branches, 1 from the Chen family, 2 from the Su family, and 1 from the Du family. Li Zijian had watched Li Chengchu grow up. He was quiet, reserved, and a fast cultivator. Now, as he looked at his cold remains, all Li Zijian could do was sigh. The Ning family had offered some compensation. Li Zijian, on behalf of the family, also provided a stipend and arranged for the remains to be returned to their respective families. Under the clear moonlight, he silently reflected, this is only the beginning. He had received word from Li Qing. She and Li Xuanfeng were only lightly wounded. Li Zijai's Beixiang Valley had also been among the few places untouched by conflict, which gave Li Zijian a measure of relief. But it's still Brother Zijai's side that worries me more. They haven't been attacked yet, but they're facing the Chuoba family. If anyone comes for them, it won't be a simple matter. As he mulled, Chen Dong came rushing up, gave a quick bow, and said gravely, "A monk has appeared in Lijiang town." Li Zijian's heart skipped a beat. He quickly rose from the main seat. Though he had long been prepared for this, tension still surged through him. He strode out of the hall and asked, "What's the situation? Can you tell who he is?" The Li family's great formation only protected a few immortal peaks. It was pure fantasy to think it could cover the dozens of towns around Munge's Lake. Those outlying areas had only basic warding arrays and cultivators rotating day and night patrols. These measures could detect low-level devil cultivators, but if a Foundation Establishment Realm Buddhist or devil cultivator slipped into town, they would almost certainly go undetected. Only strange movements might trigger a response. Li Zijian had long suspected that some master monk would eventually infiltrate a town to gather information. He had placed guards everywhere so that any disturbance would be noticed. So he asked 2 quick questions. Did he kill anyone or confuse minds? Chen Dong shook his head and replied solemnly, "The monk is just sitting in the restaurant in town. He asked someone to send word that he wishes to see the Li family's steward." The townsfolk, startled by his sudden appearance in monk's robes, were both frightened and uneasy. They sent someone to inform the mountain immediately. "I happened to be patrolling nearby and rushed here with the news."